Hey guys. This is part 3 of What If Naruto Was Azula's Bodyguard. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 7, Training and Fighting. Location: Earth Kingdom. 2 days had passed since the fight in Tuzin. They had spent the night in a rock quarry. Now it was early morning, and the only people who are supposed to be up that early is Team Guy. The reason the word supposed was used was because that Aang was also up and excited too. Today's the day, he said excitingly as he leapt into the air. He landed next to Sokka and Akela. Can you believe it? After all that time searching for a teacher, I'm finally starting earthbending. And this place, it's perfect. Don't you think? He looked down at the two. Sokka, Akela? Both of them managed to throw him a glare at the same time. Oh, the two of you are still sleeping, huh? Too early for this, grumbled Sokka. Akela growled sleepily in agreement. Sorry, Aang whispered. Suddenly, the ground began to rumble and a nearby earth tent broke open. Good morning, earthbending student, Toph announced. Good morning, Sifu Toph, Aang greeted in return as she walked over to them. Hey, you never call me Sifu Katara, Katara said with a little bit of jealousy from where she sat in her sleeping bag. Don't take it personally, Katara, Neji told her. He had seen the same kind of look on academy students who had just technically graduated. He's just excited. Aang began to rub the back of his head. Well, if you think I should. He wanted to be polite to everyone, not rude. Sokka sat up, glared at the two of them and grumbled something at them. Sorry, Snizzles. We'll do our earthbending as quietly as we can, Toph told him before bending a rock to jet out of the ground beneath him, sending the bag skywards. It was probably not one of her better ideas. She was immediately pinned by Akela, who had his teeth at her throat. You know, Toph, for a supposed genius, that was pretty stupid of you, Sokka told her as he stood above her. The sleeping bag fell down to the earth harmlessly as they all stared at the scene. What? How did you? She tried to ask. She thought that he was still in the bag when she sent it upward. You need to stop underestimating non-benders. He looked over at the wolf. Let her go, Akela. He did as he was instructed, releasing Toph from his jaws. You trained your senses and your body very well, Sokka. You are very youthful, Lee shouted out. He had seen what the tribesman had done and was impressed by what he saw. Focus, Lee, barked out Guy. While Sokka is indeed youthful, we must get going. His student nodded in agreement and got serious again. Where are you guys going? Katara asked them. She had gotten out of her sleeping bag and was now standing up, looking at them. To get Naruto, Neji answered. He was ready to go, and was just waiting for the rest of his team to be the same. Why? The last time that happened, he almost killed Hinata. She could still see the kunai in the Hyuga's stomach in the blue, swirling orb that inched closer and closer to her face. He is still our teammate and our friend, Lee stated. You do know that Naruto doesn't see it like that anymore, right? Sokka asked. It was obvious back in Omashu. But then he remembered that this shinobi team wasn't there. They still believed that Naruto would come back. It doesn't matter. Then how are you going to find him? I thought that Team Kurenai was the tracking team. These guys looked like they were the fighting team. Lady Hinata has taught me some things on how to use the Byakugan with tracking, Neji told them. It had taken a while, but he managed to pick up a few things. Also, just because we aren't a tracking team doesn't mean we don't know a few things about tracking, Tenten stated. Despite how her sensei might act, he believed in a through education. As such, they had a basic understanding of many shinobi fields. Okay, what's your plan for tracking him? The tribesman asked them. We will head back to Tuzin and then track him from there, Guy told him. Now we must be off. Come, my youthful students. Let us track our wayward friend with the power of youth. The four of them took off in an impressive show of speed. After they left, Aang hopped over Toph. So what move are you going to teach me first? He asked excitedly. Rockalaunch? The Trembler? Oh, maybe I could learn how to make a whirlpool of land. He would have continued if his new teacher hadn't placed a hand in front of him. Let's start with Move a Rock, Toph told him before walking away. Sounds good, he replied, giving her a clap. Akela gave a yawn and woofed something at the air nomad. If Kiba was there, the yawn and the woof would have translated to suck up. A couple of minutes later, Toph and Aang stood in front of two big rocks while everyone else watched from the sidelines. The key to earthbending is your stance. You've gotta be steady and strong, Toph explained as she showed an earthbending stance. Rock is a stubborn element. If you're going to move it, you've gotta be like a rock yourself. Like a rock, got it, Aang repeated. Good. Now the actual motion for this one is pretty simple. She took one step towards the rock and at the same time, punched the rock. The rock slid across the quarry until it hit one of the walls. Okay, you ready to give it a try? She asked him. He mimicked the stance he was shown. I'm ready. He tried to punch the rock but instead, he slid backwards until he crashed into a still sleeping Appa and fell to the ground. Rock beats airbender, Sokka stated drily. Akela nodded in agreement. A younger Iroh ran over a hill with a single tree. He had a smile on his face, for behind him was his son, Lu Ten. I got you, Dad, he said happily, pretending he bent a fireball at his father. Iroh turned around and pretending to be hit, he fell to the ground. Lu Ten jumped onto his stomach, the two of laughing happily. The sky then turned dark and began to rain. A much older Iroh knelt before a grave. My beloved Lu Ten, he said. I will see you again. Just then, he heard a familiar voice say uncle. Opening his eyes, he saw Zuko looking at him with worry. Looking around, he saw that he was in an abandoned shack. He tried to sit up but felt pain in his left shoulder. It's been some time since I've been to hit that close to the heart, he noted. Zuko looked away. I'm sorry about that. I should have seen that fireball coming, he apologized. He really should have seen it coming. Do not blame yourself, nephew. I chose to push you out of the way. I know. He reached for the tea that was brewed and poured some into a cup. I hope I made it the way you like it. He handed the cup to Iroh. He had tried to do it the right way, but he wasn't sure. The Dragon of the West brought the tea to his lips and drank. He made a face. His nephew had not done it the way it liked it, but was able to hide it quickly. Good, he told Zuko as he dared himself to take another sip. That was very, bracing. Zuko poured him another cup and gave it to his uncle. When he wasn't looking, Iroh threw the tea out the window behind him. So, uncle, he began. I've been thinking. It's only a matter of time before I run into Azula again. I'm going to need to know more advanced firebending if I want to stand a chance against her. I know what you're going to say, she's my sister and I should be trying to get along with her. Well, yes, you should do that. But you do have a point. After a little struggling, Iroh managed to stand up. It's time to resume your training, he declared. Zuko looked a little more hopeful at those words. I don't understand what went wrong, Katara said, looking at Toph as Aang walked back to the rock. He did it exactly the way you did it. Maybe there's another way, Aang offered. He approached the rock in an airbending stance. What if I came at the boulder from a different angle? That should solve the problem, right? Toph grabbed the back of his shirt. No, that's the problem. You've got to stop thinking like an airbender. There's no different angle, no clever solution, no trickety-trick that's going to move that rock. She shoved him out of the way. You've got to face it head on. And when I say head on, I mean like this. She leapt at the rock and shattered it by simply head-butting it. Whoa! Aang said in surprise. As he tried to come to terms with what he just heard, Katara decided to try and help by going after Toph, who had walked away. I've been training Aang for a while now, she said once she got up to the earthbender. He really responds well to a positive teaching experience. Lots of encouragement and praise, kind words, she clarified. If he's doing something wrong, perhaps a gentle nudge in the right direction. Thanks, Katara, Toph replied. A gentle nudge, I'll try that. By the time Team Guy returned to Tuzin, they still noticed a lack of activity there, having been long abandoned due to the iron mines running out of ores to harvest. Lee could see a large mountain range overlooking the abandoned town, which he and his team later learned from a wandering cabbage merchant the name of the mountain range. The cabbage merchant also revealed that he was going over the Zishan Mountains and into the border with Zhejiu province of the Earth Kingdom. After another half-hour of conversation between Team Guy and the cabbage merchant, he soon went off in his direction, leaving them alone with crucial information. We got lucky, thanks to that cabbage merchant, Tenten announced. The tracks were made on hard ground, not sand. Plus, the wind hasn't been blowing hard around here. She was checking the footprints by the town entrance. Indeed, we also know which way Naruto went, Lee said as he came back into the town. He seemed excited about something. What do you mean? Naruto made the same kind of footprint both Guy-sensei and I make when we run laps around the village. I don't think he knew about the footprints, and if he did, he was probably hoping that they would be blown over by the wind, he quickly explained. Niji, confirm, Guy ordered. Niji nodded and activated his Byakugan to look in the direction of the tracks. It's very faint, but I can sense Naruto's chakra signal in that direction, he said after looking around for a couple of minutes. I thought Hinata said you wouldn't be able to see Naruto's chakra unless he used a jutsu, Tenten said. No offense to Lady Hinata, but I am better in using the Byakugan, he replied, boasting slightly. Naruto's control is still incredible though. That's why his chakra signal is faint to me. Nevertheless, we have found his trail, Guy announced loudly. Now we will go forward with the power of youth. While not all the team agreed with how he said it, they all agreed on what he meant. Sure enough, they were following the trail at full speed, which in Team Guy means that both Niji and Tenten can easily stay with Guy and Lee. You see, in that team, full speed is directly below youthful speed. I'm bored, Mai stated as she lay on the ground outside the tank train, looking up at the sky. You're always bored, Mai, Ty Lee told her, lying on the ground beside her. Well, now I'm really bored. Mai, please give it a rest. Just think of this as a break, Azula told her. The three girls hadn't been able to do much for the past 2 days. After spending a day fixing the hole Naruto made in the tank train, the engineers found that they needed more wood as fuel for the fire. That meant another day for finding wood in the nearby forest. Today was the day they were supposed to move again. The engineers just needed a little more time to get the wood down to proper size. Meanwhile, the girls had sparred, ran, relaxed, and basically did anything that kept them from getting bored. Hey, where's Naruto? Ty Lee asked out of the blue. Yeah, where is he? Mai asked as well, genuinely curious. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen him for the past 2 days, Azula said before shrugging her shoulders. Well, if he had to do something and wanted to be left alone, we should respect his wishes. You're sure acting nonchalant about him, considering you like him. What? The princess of the Fire Nation would like to say that she didn't squeak, but she did. I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm the Avatar, she replied in deadpan. Come on, it's so obvious, Azula. You like him, Ty Lee said with a smirk. It wasn't often that they could Azula flustered like this. Did that small crush you had on him grow when we weren't looking? Azula blushed a little bit. Well, I don't know. I haven't been sure since you Dao. That had left some doubts in her mind. You mean that fiasco with Cory? Mai asked. She nodded. She told me what he had told her. He said that a crush can turn to love if you realize that your crush has imperfections. Right now, I don't think that Naruto has any imperfections. She tried to think of some but couldn't. If he had any, he kept them well hidden. Oh, I know an imperfection, Ty Lee said. He's always polite and serious but also cheerful. Ty Lee, that's not an imperfection, Mai told her. However, I do know an imperfection that he has. That got everyone's attention. What's that? Azula asked. He's secretive. He's never told us about his past or who those people with the Avatar are to him. Yeah, you're right. Also, he didn't really tell us about the people we saw in the swamp, just that they're dead, Ty Lee pointed out. It was something that vaguely annoyed her, because it was not a major issue that she had to deal with. What's he hiding from us? It was a question they all wanted to have answered but knew that it wouldn't come from him, at least, not voluntarily. I don't know. The acrobat had a frown on her face for a brief moment, and then brightened up. But what I do know is that you do like him, Azula, she told the Fire Nation princess. And how can you tell? She asked with sarcasm in her voice. Silently, she didn't want the conversation to continue. But she also knew that nothing short of an act from the spirits would make Ty Lee stop now. Because there are days where the two of you act like a couple, she answered. You argue and fight, but you also work well together in and out of combat. She's got a point, Mai noted. They had seen it so many times, it didn't surprise them anymore. Also, we're pretty sure that Naruto likes you as well. What? What do you mean? Azula asked, surprised. She didn't think that the blonde had thought of her like that. We're quite confident in the fact that Naruto wouldn't let any girl sleep with her head on his naked chest, she said with a dry smirk. Her blush, which she had been trying to get rid of, got redder. You saw that? Mai now had a little smirk on her face. It's not every day the princess of the Fire Nation got flustered. We walked in on you guys the next morning. I decided that the both of us would leave you two alone. Ty Lee kept grousing about the fact that neither of us were good artists. If you had made any pictures, I would have burned them, she hissed at Ty Lee. Then it's a good thing we didn't make any, the acrobat replied easily enough. There is another thing that tells us Naruto likes you. What's that? He yelled at you for putting yourself in danger. I don't think I ever seen someone act that protective with you. Before Azula could reply, there was a sudden wind coming from the nearby forest as well as the sound of something to cut the air. What was that? Ty Lee asked, lifting her head up and looking around. I don't know, but let's go check it out, Azula said as she leapt off the ground and charged into the forest. Secretly, she was glad the conversation was over with. Naruto looked around and saw all the scarred tree trunks. Okay, need to work on size, he noted. Look on the bright side, you finally managed to get the thing working, the Kyuubi said to him. Yeah, and I almost fell over because the thing was too big and heavy. Just look at all the trees. They all looked like a fierce battle just taken place, and they received the blunt of it. And that was just from the one jutsu he was trying to create. True. I still think that using a Kage Bunshin would help. It certainly helped in the past, why couldn't it do the same in the present? For training, yes, the blonde agreed. But it would be a crutch in battle. I want to be able to use this thing on my own. Not every enemy he faced would give him the precious seconds he needed to create it. You said the same thing when you started to practice using the Rasengan with only one hand, the fox commented. That had been a long 2 months, especially since those months were during a siege. And I was right, he replied. Still, it needs work. The thing only lasts a few seconds and I want to be able to throw it. He still had to figure out how to do that. That was when Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai appeared behind him. Is everything okay, Naruto? Azula asked him. She was concerned because she saw the trees surrounding them. But she didn't see any enemies. Yes, everything is fine, he said, trying to assure them. I was working on something and it turned out to be a little bigger than expected. He turned around to look at them. What he saw made him stop and give them a once-over. Sunning ourselves, were we? They looked down and then realized that they went to check on the disturbance in their undergarments, giving him quite the show. Pervert! Cried Ty Lee. She tried to him, but with no success. Nothing of the sort, Ty Lee, he replied as he dodged the strikes. I'm just stating the obvious. Calm down, Mai told a blushing Ty Lee, holding her back. Do you enjoy the view, Naruto? Azula asked her bodyguard with a smirk. She didn't normally do something like this, she was a princess, damn it. She had her pride, but she took a pose for him. He looked at her, and then looked at her. Let me put it this way, I'm glad the three of you know how to defend yourselves. Why's that? If you ever did something like this back home, you would have a lot of guys coming after you, he told them. It was the truth. He wasn't making any of it up. They were all quite beautiful, all three of them. And yet, his attention was on his princess. Kit, we've got incoming, the Kyuubi said suddenly, getting his attention. What is it? He silently asked, becoming alert. Whenever the fox said something like that, it was best to pay attention. It's faint, but I think it's the shinobi team that's currently with the airbender brat. You know that weird guy who keeps going on about youth? It was hard not to notice that guy whenever he was around. When he heard that, his eyes went flat. Azula, are the engineers almost done with the wood? He asked the princess. They only need another half-hour to be done, she told him, not sure as to why he wanted to know that. When they're done, have them set off immediately. As for you three, please get dressed and join them when they leave, he ordered. She was immediately suspicious. What's going on, Naruto? He looked away. I'm going to get company soon and I don't want you three to be around when they get here, he said shortly. But they understood what he wasn't trying to say. Is it that group of people from Omashu? Ty Lee asked, deciding to be the one to break the silence that had momentarily fallen around them. He shook his head. It's a different one. It's that group that was with the Avatar at Tuzin, isn't it? Azula asked. He nodded once. We're staying, she stated, the other two nodding in agreement. No, you're not. When the tank train leaves, you will be on it. His voice was firm. He wasn't going to budge on this. We can take them, Ty Lee declared. She was certain of it. A couple of strikes from her, and they would be down for the count. He looked at her. Ty Lee, I know that you and Mai were about to fight two of them when the sky bison sent you into the water. Be glad that it did that. You would have lost in seconds. When this team fights seriously, they tend to rearrange the surrounding landscape. You are leaving in the tank train, no arguments. Azula was about to argue again, but then she saw the look in his eyes. They held the seriousness of a soldier about to go into battle. At that point, she knew it was pointless to argue. Very well, she agreed. Just promise me one thing. What's that? He asked. Promise me that you'll win. He smiled. You doubt my ability to win a fight? He asked with a hurt voice they all knew was faked. But they left anyway, leaving Naruto alone in the clearing. Keep your knees high, twinkle toes. Toph roared at her student. In currently holding a big boulder on his back and was trying to walk. Every time he made a step, Toph would bend the earth beneath his foot to rise a little bit. After 2 steps, the weight of the boulder sent him off to the side and into the ground. Next, she stood in front of a flat piece of stone. Rubbing her hands, she dug through the rock like it was sand. He tried to repeat her actions, only to hurt his hand at the first attempt. After that, he stood in a stance and waited. The waiting was causing him to sweat. Suddenly, Toph came out of the rock to his right and shouted rock-like at him. He yelped and fell backwards to the ground. She simply bent the earth underneath him to stand him up again and flicked his forehead. After borrowing Sokka's club, she would have just taken it, but the fact that Akela was there and growling lightly convinced her to change her mind. She handed it over to a blindfolded Aang. She then had him play the earth-bending version of whack-a-mole. He kept missing at first but finally managed to hit one, earning him a slight nod of approval from Toph. Next, she bent the earth to raise a wall on both sides of them. Then she drew a line in the ground and bent the surrounding rock into armor, covering her from head to toe, save for her eyes, which is kinda redundant. She charged straight at Aang. He grabbed hold of her when she crashed into him and began to push her back. After some struggling, he managed to push her back across the line. She then had him stand on what can only be described as 2 earthen stilts while tossing and catching a weight. She moved between the 2 stilts and punched them, sending a shockwave up both of them. Aang didn't move, so the shockwave just blew through him and his clothes. She gave him a single nod of approval, making him smile. Sokka stood in a tree, watching as a small furry creature came by and ate a patch of grass. You're awfully cute, he said. But unfortunately for you, you're made of meat. He kept watching the creature. Just a bit closer, he muttered. When the creature finally left the grass and came near the tree, he acted. Yelling a battle cry, he leapt down with machete in hand, ready to kill the creature. Unfortunately for him, he landed on top of a crevice. He got buried up to his waist. The creature simply walked up closer to him. Gotcha! He cried, about to swing his machete again. This caused him to be buried even further, but he managed to spread his arms out. The result was him buried up to his armpits, allowing him to move his arms freely. He tried to move his body out of the crevice but with no success. You are one lucky little meat creature, he told said creature, which only wagged its tail in response. He was glad Akela had stayed behind to take a nap on Appa. The wolf would have been rolling around on the ground in wolfish laughter. Lightning is a pure expression of fire-bending, without aggression, Iroh told Zuko. It's not fueled by rage or emotion the way other fire-bending is. He reached for the new batch of brewed tea. Some call lightning the cold-blooded fire. It is precise and deadly, like Azula. Or Naruto, Zuko replied. He could still remember that night on Ember Island. True, Iroh agreed. To perform the technique requires peace of mind. I see, that's where drinking tea, to calm the mind. It made a little sense to him. He briefly wondered if that had to do with the fact he spent 3 years with his uncle. Oh yeah, good point, Iroh said. He was drinking the tea because he was a tea enthusiast. I mean, yes. After they had finished the tea, they left the shack and walked over to the nearby cliff edge. If either of them looked out to the distance, they would have seen a familiar ruined town. There is energy all around us, Iroh began. The energy is both yin and yang, positive energy and negative energy. Only a select few firebenders can separate these energies. This creates an imbalance. The energy wants to restore balance and, in the moment, The positive and the negative energy come crashing back together. You provide release and guidance, creating lightning. He motioned Zuko to step back. When he was sure he had enough room, he began to move his arms in a circular motion, already generating lightning. Once he was done, he shot his right hand, which was folded save for 2 fingers, forward, and the lightning that was stored was fired off into the air. "I'm ready to try it," Zuko stated after he watched the display. "Remember, once you've separated the energy, you do not command it. You are simply its humble guide," Iroh warned him, idly rubbing his left shoulder. "Breathe first." He did indeed breathe and began to copy Iroh's motions. The first thing that Iroh noticed was wrong was the fact that his fingers were not generating lightning. When he shot his fingers out, he didn't generate lightning. It just exploded in front of his face, sending him crashing into the ground. Naruto had sat down against one of the tree trunks in the clearing. It had been an hour and a half since the tank train had left with the girls in it. He waited in anticipation, wondering as to how he would fare against Team Guy, as opposed to how he and Azula's group managed to fight Team Kurenai to a standstill in Omashu. "They're here," the QB said. Even though the surrounding area was quiet, the fox knew they weren't alone. "I know," Naruto silently replied, having noticed that he had guests. He looked out to the clearing. "You might as well come out. I know you're there," he called out. The echo of his voice seemed to reverberate around the trees, becoming fainter each time it was heard. The forest was silent after the echo disappeared, but the people who were looking for him landed into the clearing. They stared at each other silently for a few minutes. "You took your time getting here," the blonde finally said. "Come quietly, Naruto," Guy told him, his tone unusually serious. "You're surrounded, and you have no backup." He barked out a laugh. "From let's go home to come quietly," he said, mostly to himself. "Next thing I know, Team Asuma is just going to try and blindside me." "When did you find about Team Asuma being here?" Lee asked. "Just now, thanks," he replied with an amused smirk. The Konoha shinobi had the decency to look ashamed. He had just unintentionally revealed a piece of information that the blonde shouldn't have heard. "Where are the girls, Naruto?" Neji asked him. The Hyuga had activated his Byakugan momentarily before arriving and only saw the blonde there. It made him wonder where the women he was supposed to be with were. "Whenever they go, you are usually with them. Isn't that the case? I'm starting to understand their patterns now. They left. This isn't their fight. Have you told them? Do they know about your past?" "No, and if I had my way about it, they never will." "That is most unyouthful of you, Naruto. Hiding your past from a girl, have you no shame?" Lee demanded. "Shut up, Lee," he curtly ordered. "It's my past, and it's my choice to tell them or not." "Naruto," Tenten said. "We know all about the Kyuubi. You don't have to hide it anymore." Silence fell all around them as her words echoed momentarily in the air. "Tsunade told you, didn't she?" he asked after a few moments, finally breaking the silence. It made sense to him. Only the Hokage would do something like that, telling the others about what he held. Neji nodded. "And showed us the results of it too," he said. Those words brought back a memory of what he saw, making him silently will it to vanish. He still had nightmares about what he read, and in some nightmares, he appeared in place of Naruto, as the Jinchuriki that was targeted for abuse, despite his possession of the Byakugan. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we?" the blonde asked as he walked forward, away from the trunk of the tree. "The 4 of you want me to come back. I'm not going anywhere. So that leaves us with only one option." He brought his hands up into a familiar hand seal. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." They all heard a poof. Beside Naruto was not 10, 100 or even 1,000 clones, there was just one. "We fight," the clone said. The 2 of them then got into different stances. The original went into a high waterbending stance while the clone went into a low fire-bending stance. "Naruto, please," begged Tenten. "We don't want to fight you." Even though he had made a clone, he was still outnumbered and outmatched. They just wanted to resolve this peacefully. He snorted in derision. "Don't lie to me. I know you want to fight me." Lee decided to begin the attack by charging forward, hoping to catch the 2 blondes off guard. "Konoha Senpu, Leaf Whirlwind!" he cried as he leapt at his opponents. As the leg reached the 2, the Naruto in the waterbending stance pressed both palms against the underside of the leg. Pushing upwards, he sent Lee into an unexpected flip. As Lee began to face the ground, the blonde put his palms on his back and guided him towards the clone. The clone reacted quickly to the incoming target. He shoved an elbow into Lee's chest and then punched him hard in the stomach with his other fist. He brought his body into a turn and snap-kicked Lee in the chest, sending him flying back to his teammates. "Lee, are you all right?" Guy asked with concern as he caught his student. "I am fine," Lee told his sensei, putting his feet back on the ground. He turned to glare at Naruto. "What kind of style was that?" "It looked like both waterbending and firebending," Neji asked. While he didn't have a lot to go with, he had also never seen the two opposite elements work in tandem like that before. "While I was being trained in the bending stances, I began to experiment in secret with a clone to see how two styles that the opposites of each other were could be used in tandem. What you just saw was the result of that experiment. You may have two shinobi skilled in the Goken, strong fist, and a shinobi skilled in the Juken, gentle fist. But this..." He and his clone switched styles, just to prove his point. "This is my own style, the Tsunken, twin fist." "Stop this, Naruto," Guy pleaded. "We don't have to fight." "That's bullshit, Guy. You commanded me to come quietly, and that sounded like an order," Naruto told him. "And we both know it." Both he and the clone charged at Team Guy. Having no other choice, they retaliated. "This time we're going to try something a little different," Toph told her student, walking past him. "Instead of moving a rock, you're going to stop a rock. Get in your horse stance," she ordered. Aang did as he was told. "I'm going to roll that boulder down at you," Toph pointed to said boulder. It was on top of a nearby cliff, sitting in front of a ramp. "If you have the attitude of an earthbender, you'll stand your stance and stop the rock. Like this." She showed him the motion of the stance. Katara decided to intervene, trying to be helpful. "Sorry, Toph, but are you sure this is really the best way to teaching earthbending?" she asked. "I'm glad you said something. Actually, there is a better way." The earthbender reached down for Aang's belt and took it off. She then warped it around his eyes. "This way, you'll really have to sense the vibrations of the boulder to stop it." "Thank you, Katara," she told the waterbender. "Yeah, thanks, Katara," Aang repeated childishly. She could only chuckle awkwardly in return. Toph had climbed up to where the boulder was. With a simple push, she sent it down the ramp and at Aang. Katara waited nervously nearby while Aang faced the oncoming boulder. Just as the boulder and Aang were about to hit each other, he chickened out and jumped over the boulder. The thing just kept on rolling until it smashed into a cliff wall. He took the blindfold off, and the first he saw was a very mad Toph. "I guess I just panicked," he tried to defend himself. "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say," Toph told him angrily. "You blew it. You had a perfect stance and perfect form. But when it came right down to it, you didn't have the guts." She shoved him to the ground. "I know, I'm sorry," he told her, not trying to stand up. "Yeah, you are sorry." She shoved her face into his. "If you're not tough enough to stop the rock, then you could at least give it the pleasure of smushing you instead of jumping out of the way like a jelly bone wimp. Now, do you have what it takes to face that rock like an earthbender?" she demanded. Instead of rousing his spirits and or his resolve, her little speech had the opposite effect. "No. I don't think I do," he admitted in a defeated voice. "It was just too difficult to understand." Katara once again decided to intervene. "Aang, it's no big deal. You'll take a break and try earthbending again when you're ready. Besides, you still have a lot of waterbending to work on. Okay?" she asked him, trying to be upbeat. "Yeah, that sounds good." He got up and followed Katara. "Yeah, whatever," Toph told the two of them. "Go splash around until you feel better." She walked away as well. But she hadn't given up yet. She was going to teach Aang earthbending whether he liked it or not. Zuko kept trying to generate lightning, but the end results kept blowing up. "Why can't I do it?" he asked his uncle, angry with himself. "Instead of lightning, it keeps exploding in my face, like everything always does." Iroh got up from where he sat. "I was afraid this might happen. You will not be able to master lightning until you dealt with the turmoil inside you." He turned to face his uncle. "What turmoil?" he demanded. It didn't sound like it to him, but he wanted an answer. "Zuko, you must let go of your feelings of shame if you want your anger to go away." "But I don't feel any shame at all. I'm as proud as ever," he objected. "Prince Zuko, pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame." Well, my life has been nothing but humbling lately, the exiled prince admitted. Not only was he exiled from the Fire Nation, but he was also on the run from them as well. Iroh looked away for a moment in thought. I have another idea. I will teach you a fire-bending move that even Azula doesn't know, because I made it up myself. His nephew looked back at him and gave an appreciative smile. You probably think I deserve this, don't you? Sokka asked the small creature, who was currently sitting on his head. In response, it looked down at him. Look, I'm sorry I hunted you, but that's just the natural order of things. Big things eat smaller things, nothing personal. But this time it didn't work out that way. The creature yawned and turned around a couple of times before sitting down again and rubbed his nose. I admit it, you're cute, Sokka told the creature. Okay, you convinced me. If I get out of this alive, it's a karmically correct, vegetarian existence for me. No meat. He paused for a second as he realized just what he had uttered. Even though meat is so tasty, his eyes grew watery about the subject. The creature leapt off his head and ran off. A fly flew nearby, but Sokka swatted at it, making it go away. He found that the most comfortable way to put his arms was to cross them and put them on the ground in front of him. The creature came back with an apple in its mouth. Hey, looks like my karma's already paying off, Sokka said as the creature dropped the apple and pushed it forward with its nose. That's okay, I got it. He simply reached for his boomerang and used it to scoop up the apple. See? The boomerang does come back. He began to munch on the apple. The battle kept going on. Despite being outnumbered and his refusal to add more numbers to his side via clones, Naruto and the one clone he did have fought Team Guy on even ground. After foiling Lee's and Guy's double attack, he fended off Neji. Tenten all the while was staying in the back, throwing weapons at him in the hopes that he would be distracted. While she didn't pin him down, she did manage to take care of the clone. Now Team Guy stood across from him, all of them lightly panting. You have improved, Naruto, Guy told him as he and Lee stood in Naruto's view of Tenten. You would have made a fine Konoha shinobi. I was a fine Konoha shinobi, he replied. Everybody else was too busy sucking up to the Uchiha to notice. Nobody cared about him. They just went right to Sasuke when talking about his team. That's not true, Lee objected. Not everyone did that. So, you're admitting that people did it? He faltered. Well, while I admit that Tucci, Irika-sensei, Gigi, and a few others didn't do it, everybody else pretty much did. Even you, Lee, the blonde said in accusation. I most certainly did not. The Konoha shinobi objected. You most certainly did. Do you remember the first time we met? It was during the Chunin exams. You met us and the first thing you demanded of us was to fight the Uchiha, and only the Uchiha. You didn't even acknowledge me as a threat. It had been something that irked him when they first fought. Ironically enough, it vanished when he watched Sasuke get beaten. But he does acknowledge you as a threat now. That's why we're fighting, Neji said. Then he smirked. Although, I had to say that the fight is over. Behind Naruto, in the trees, Tenten held a katana in her hands and launched herself at the blonde. She swung at his side, hoping to injure him so that Neji could get in close and paralyze him. Or so she thought. What the? She thought in surprise as a loud clang filled the air in the clearing. Naruto had blocked her strike with his Jien. It was almost like he was expecting it. How did you? Did you honestly think that you got the clone? He asked in a bored tone. Of course I did. She thought. She had taken the clone out with a kunai to the heart and to the head. You thought that you had taken the clone out by piercing its heart and head with kunai, correct? He asked her again, with the same bored tone. What? How did? She narrowed her eyes as she realized the truth. It was a genjutsu. She growled. He smiled. A minor one, designed to fool you into believing what you wanted to see happen to actually occur. You can use genjutsus now? Lee asked in surprise. As far as he could remember, the blonde couldn't grasp the concepts of genjutsu. This was something they had not expected. I know a few, he said in answer. Then how do you explain the smoke? Tenten demanded. If she hadn't gotten the clone, why had it been covered in smoke before disappearing? Shinobi Tools 101, he answered shortly, like it was the most obvious thing. They were all confused by those words. Then Neji remembered his days in the academy and the lessons he learned. The clone used a smoke bomb, he said in realization. Suddenly it all made sense. Correct, Naruto said in agreement. Just because I haven't been in the elemental countries for 3 years, doesn't mean I don't know how to make a smoke bomb. They were always useful for pranks when I was younger. So how did you know what I was going to do? Tenten asked him. How did you know that I was behind you when you didn't look behind you? Once again, he smiled and tapped his head with his free hand. The clone told me. While 3 members of Team Guy looked confused, one got the point. You know the secret of the Kagebunshin? Guy asked, surprised by the fact. He never would have thought that Naruto would discover it on his own. The blonde nodded. I give credit to my teacher, he said, mystifying them. You flatter me, Kit, the fox told him. Is it flattery if it's true? He silently asked back. Yes, and it makes it even sweeter. So that was his plan, Guy realized. He used the genjutsu and the smoke bomb to allow the clone to disappear into the trees. When the clone saw what Tenten was about to do, he dismissed himself so that the original could get his memories. It was a good plan. He was willing to admit that. Tell me saw something, Tenten, Naruto asked, bringing everybody's attention back to what was going on. Are you any good with that katana? He looked at the weapon in her hands. She gave a little snort of disbelief. I am a master of weapons. It was an insult to her for him to even think she wasn't. I didn't ask if you were a master of weapons. I asked you if you were any good with the katana. There was a difference, he knew that much. What do you think? His answer was to simply swat the katana away and smacked her side with the flat side of his yin. Not very, apparently, he stated as she yelped in pain. Why you? She swung the katana at him again. He twisted to the side to dodge it, and slapped her on the ass with the flat side of his yin. She kept trying to hit him with the katana, but he had moved into an airbending stance, and thus was always moving. Every time she tried to hit him, he'd twist or turn out of the way and then would hit her with the flat side of his yin. She was soon getting bruises everywhere, and was also getting angrier. Will you stop that? She yelled at him as she attacked him again with the katana. Why should I? He asked in return as he blocked the strike. It's very entertaining. Tenten, called out Niji. Break off high back. It was a term that Team Guy used when in a combat situation. To break off high back meant the person who was currently fighting the opponent would jump away in a high backflip. Meanwhile, the rest of the team would send a barrage of kunai and shuriken at the opponent. While they were distracted by this, the airborne person would land and engage again, taking care of the distracted opponent. She broke contact with her katana and went airborne with a high backflip. Then he saw the oncoming barrage. But he did something that Team Guy wasn't expecting. He knelt down on one knee with his head bowed low. This way, the barrage of kunai and shuriken passed harmlessly over his head. Then a voice from the woods called out. Futon, de Tapa, wind style, great breakthrough. A huge gust of wind flew out of the woods. Not only did it stop the barrage, it redirected it back at the throwers. Team Guy leapt out of the way of the incoming barrage. When it had passed, Naruto had stood back up like nothing had happened. What? How? Lee tried to ask but was unable to form the question. Did you really think I wouldn't be able to learn new ninjutsu while I was here? Naruto asked the team, amused by their reactions. Before they could answer, another voice spoke up. And did you really think I wouldn't learn what my elemental affinity is? A person walked out of the woods, revealing himself as another Naruto. Guy then realized his mistake. The clone didn't just dismiss himself, he made a second clone. He thought silently. How do you know what your elemental affinity is? Niji asked in stunned surprise. Or even in elemental jutsu? That was something they hadn't learned until they were Chunin once again. I give credit to where credit is due, Naruto told them. The clone moved into an earthbending stance while the original went into an airbending stance while also keeping his Jin out. Weren't we in the middle of something? While Momo was trying to catch a frog, and failing, Katara and Aang stood in a marsh moving a small blob of water in a circle between the two of them. You know this block you're having is only temporary, right? Katara asked Aang. I don't want to talk about it, he replied. You do realize that's the problem, don't you? If you face this issue instead of avoiding it, she tried to tell him. I know. I get it, alright? He cut her off, letting the blob of water fall down into the pool they were in. I need to face it head on like a rock, but I just can't do it. I don't know why I can't, but I can't. Aang, if fire and water are opposites, then what's the opposite of air? She asked him, trying to help him out. I guess it is earth. It was the only element that she hadn't spoken of. That's why it's so hard for you to get this. You're working with your natural opposite, but you'll figure it out. I know you will. She reached behind her back and plucked out a reed. Think fast. She threw the reed at him. Aang reacted quickly, bending the water to slice the reed in half. Excellent, you have the reflexes of a waterbending master. Thanks, Katara. He then bowed to her. Sifu Katara. She gave a small smile and returned the bow. Fire is the element of power, Iroh lectured Zuko, drawing the symbol for fire in the dirt with a stick. The people of the Fire Nation have desire and will and the energy and drive to achieve what they want. He drew the symbol for Earth. Earth is the element of substance. The people of the Earth Kingdom are diverse and strong. They are persistent and enduring. He began to draw the symbol for air. Air is the element of freedom. The air nomads detached themselves from worldly concerns and found peace and freedom. Also, they apparently had pretty good senses of humor. He grinned at his nephew. Zuko just stared at him, so he continued, drawing the symbol for water. Water is the element of change. The people of the Water Tribe can adapt to many things. They have a deep sense of community and love that holds them together through anything. Why are you telling me these things? Zuko finally asked his uncle. He wasn't seeing the point. It is important to draw wisdom from many different places, he explained. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. To emphasize his point, he drew lines, separating the four elements. Understanding others, the other elements and the other nations, will help you become whole. He drew a circle around the elements, making them all whole. All this four elements talk is sounding like Avatar stuff, his nephew commented. It is the combination of the four elements in one person that makes the Avatar so powerful. He pointed the stick at Zuko's chest. But it can make you more powerful too. You see, the technique I am about to teach you is one I learned from studying the waterbenders. Zuko looked slightly hopeful. Aang sat on a big rock, trying to meditate. As he did, Toph came over and sat down nearby. Aang, I found these nuts in your bag, she told him, holding up a bag with a little Aang face on it. I figured you wouldn't mind, and besides, if you did, you're too much of a pushover to do anything about it. As a matter of fact, I don't mind. I'm happy to share anything I have, he told her in an even tone. You know, I'm really glad you feel that way. Because I also have this great new nutcracker. She picked up and twirled Aang's glider staff. Aang turned around with a look of unease as she brought the staff down on the nut, cracking the shell open. Actually, I'd prefer if you didn't, crack. That's an antique, handcrafted by the monks, crack. It's a delicate instrument. She would break it if she kept doing that. It's not the only delicate instrument around here, Toph said mockingly as she and Momo ate the nuts. She walked away, banging the staff against rocks along the way. She was trying to get him mad, to come after her and take the staff back. Instead, he just went back to his meditation. But moments after she left, Katara came by. Hey Aang, have you seen? Meditating here. He cut her off. It's important, the waterbender assured him. It's almost sundown and Sokka isn't back yet. I think we should search for him. He turned to face her. That was troubling. Sokka was never one to disappear on them for long. We'll find him faster if we split up. He got off the rock and the two of them went in two different directions. They had fought for hours. While Team Guy had enough numbers to keep Naruto occupied while the others caught their breath, Naruto had his stamina and his style. He had them guessing by switching the styles that he and the clone were using when they didn't expect it. He had lost count of the number of times he had moved into a fire-bending, airbending, earthbending or waterbending stance while fighting them. He also kept them on their toes by sometimes using ninjutsu at them, though he could only use wind-style jutsu. As a result, they had pretty much torn up the surrounding woods. But he was also getting tried himself, plus his Jian had been destroyed at some time during the fight. Now once again, Team Guy stood across from him. Well, thank you for the exercise. But I'm afraid I must be going, he suddenly announced, surprising them. He dismissed the clone and began to walk away. Don't turn your back on us, Naruto. Guy yelled at him. You're not going anywhere. Why not? He asked as he walked away. He was putting a show of bravado, trying to make it look like he had just gotten bored instead of getting tried. If you do, we will come after you, the leader of Team Guy told him. We will follow you and we will take the girls hostage. He stopped, but he kept his back to them. And what would you do with them? Neji smiled to himself. We have him, he thought. We'll take them hostage, and if you don't come with us, we will kill them. It is unyouthful, but we will do it, Lee said. If he was younger and less experienced, he might have objected to the idea. But he wasn't. You could do that, Naruto acknowledged, finally turning around to them. But there was a smirk on his face. But then that would mean the failure of your mission and the Fire Nation's victory in the war. I think Azula wouldn't care if you killed her if that was the outcome. What do you mean? Tenten asked with suspicion. It's simple. You take me hostage or kill the girls. The Avatar and his friends die. How would? Neji began to ask. Then he understood. You've had a clone tracking us since Tuzin. It seemed like the thing the blonde would do. Then all we'd have to do is knock you unconscious when we take you with us, Lee said. If they did that, the clone wouldn't know to kill Aang and the others. Wouldn't work, Naruto replied, pointing at the woods behind him. Did you think the first clone only made one other clone? He asked them. There's a second clone. Guy silently realized. He's watching us right now. The minute we take Naruto hostage, he'll dismiss himself, and that will let the other clone know what will happen, allowing him to kill everybody back at the rock quarry. I am leaving now. You can try and follow me to take the girls. But I know where the Avatar is at this moment. I could put you on a false trail that would lead you nowhere near the girls. So, goodbye. He walked away. When he was about to disappear from their view, he stopped again. By the way, you'll have until dark. What? Shouted Lee. What do you mean? But he didn't answer, he just disappeared. He means that if we don't get back to the others by the time it's dark, the clone's going to. Neji didn't finish that sentence. They all knew what would happen. We must go, now, Guy ordered. They all ate soldier pills and ran back the way they came at full speed. They had to get back to the others now. Sokka was trying to reach for the creature, but had a hard time considering the creature was behind him and was pulling on his wolf tail. Okay, karma person or thing, whoever is charge of this stuff, he said aloud. If I can just get out of this situation alive, I will give up meat and sarcasm, okay? The creature finally pulled off the small band of leather that held the wolf tail together, making the tribesman give a small yelp in pain and giving him some really messy hair. That's all I got. It's pretty much my whole identity. Sokka, the meat and sarcasm guy, but I'm willing to be Sokka the veggies and straight talk fellow, deal? You might want weight on that idea, a now familiar voice told him. He looked up and saw the robed spirit. Sifu, he said in greeting. Turning his head to look at the creature, he saw that it was frozen in mid-motion. Frozen in a moment? The spirit nodded. Are you in charge of this whole karma thing? No, but I happen to be good friends with the person who is. But more importantly, I'm here to talk to you, Sifu told him. What do you want to talk about? You, he answered. You don't have to put yourself down like that. Meat and sarcasm are not your whole identity. Well, what else is there? It seemed like everything at that point to him. How about the fact that you're a planner, a thinker, an inventor, or that you're good with weapons? When he heard those facts, he knew that it was the truth. But he still had doubts. What are you trying to say, Sifu? He asked, wanting a straight answer. Do you know why you're with this group? I had to tag along to make sure my little sister didn't do something stupid and come up with the plans in the process? He asked, half sarcastic and half serious. True, but you're also here to remind the Benders that they are still human. You're here so that they never get a swelled head and think that they are all-powerful. They see you and they see what they can become without their bending. So I'm a reminder that they could just be as weak as me? He couldn't see it, but somehow, he knew that the spirit was grinning. Did I ever say that you were the weakest? If anything, you're the strongest one in the group. Thanks, Sifu, I needed that, he said quietly. That last part made him feel a bit better. That's what a Sifu does, he teaches and encourages. With that said, Sifu disappeared, and time began to flow again. At that point Aang showed up. Aang, thank goodness. Have you got any meat? Sokka asked, happy to see his friend. Aang ran up to him. Sokka, are you okay? He asked. He reached for the tribesman's arms and tried to pull him out of the crevice. It didn't really work. Stop. You're going to pull my arms off, Sokka told the Avatar. He could feel his arms being pulled, but the rest of his body was staying put. Aang stepped back. I bet I can airbend you out of here, he said. Sokka could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The airbender tried to bend a huge column of air from underneath Sokka's feet. But the only result was his hair being shaped up into a semi-mohawk, which was flattened by the hilt of his machete. Seriously, Aang, I know you're new at it, but I could use a little earthbending here, he told his friend, looking expectantly at him. Aang turned to face away from him. I can't do it, he admitted, feeling embarrassed by that simple fact. Well, if you can't earthbend me out of here, go get Toph. I can't do that either. You can't, why not? It was a simple enough of a request. Why couldn't he do it? It would just be really uncomfortable, Aang said, trying to explain. Uncomfortable? Sokka asked with full and obvious sarcasm. Well, I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable. Thanks, Sokka, the air nomad told him, sitting down next to the crevice and completely missing the sarcasm. This whole earthbending thing really has me confused. There's so much pressure. Everybody expects me to get it right away. It puts me in a really awkward position. Awkward position, I think I know the feeling, he said, again with obvious sarcasm. But again, Aang didn't get it. If I try, I fail. But if I don't try, I'm never going to get it. I feel like I'm caught between a rock and hard place. It felt embarrassing to him. He was the Avatar. He was supposed to be the master of all four elements. And yet, he couldn't even do one of them. He just didn't know what to do. Sokka just looked at him. Aang, can you do me a favor? What? Bring your head down closer to me. Aang wasn't sure what he wanted but brought his head down anyway. A little closer, Sokka urged him. He brought it closer. That should do it. And without warning, the tribesman proceeded to smack him upside the head, hard. Oh. What was that for? Aang demanded with tears in his eyes. He had never known Sokka to do something like that. The sting that came with the smack seemed to burn on his head, making him feel all of it. Are you done whining? Stop being a little kid who stops doing something because you yelled at about doing it wrong once. Get your act together, the water paragon ordered him, his voice becoming hard. I just told you I don't care, Aang. Sokka shouted him down. Stop having a pity party. This morning, you woke up everybody because you were so excited to learn earthbending. You say it's hard for you to learn this, well no duh. Did you expect it to be easy? Toph said it herself, it's a stubborn element. That means you must be stubborn as well. Stop complaining about it being hard and deal with it. He sat there in silence until he finally nodded his head. You're right, Sokka. Sorry about complaining there. Don't apologize to me. I've been here all day. Just then the creature came back. Aang, this is my friend, Fu Cuddlypoops. Fu Cuddlypoops, Aang, the tribesman introduced the two of them. Aang picked up the creature. What a cute name for a little baby saber-toothed moose lion cub, he declared, standing up. Really? Wondered Sokka. He looks nothing like a saber-toothed mouse lion. It's hard to tell before their giant teeth and horns grow in. He looked closer at Fu. What are you doing out here, little guy? Did you lose your mama? The loud growl behind him was his answer. Turning around, Aang saw Fu's mother, a fully grown saber-toothed moose lion. Waterbenders deal with the flow of energy, Iroh explained to Zuko as the two of them practice a basic waterbending move. A waterbender lets their defense become their offense, turning their opponent's energy against them. I learned the way to do this with lightning. You can teach me how to redirect lightning? Zuko asked, surprised. That was something he had never heard before. He nodded. If you let the energy in your own body flow, the lightning will follow it. You must create a pathway from your fingertips, up your arm to your shoulder, then down to your stomach. The stomach is the source of energy in your body. It is called the Sea of Chi. Only in my case it is more like a vast ocean. He laughed at his own joke. Zuko said nothing, so he continued. From the stomach, you direct it up again and out the other arm. The stomach detour is critical. You must not let the lightning through your heart, or the damage could be deadly. You may wish to try a physical motion, to get a feel for the pathway's flow. He took a stance. Like this. Zuko copied the stance and began to mimic his uncle. Slowly but surely, they went through the motions. Now, are you focusing your energy? Can you feel your own chi flowing in, down, up, and out? Iroh asked him. I think so, Zuko said. It felt a little weird, doing a form that wasn't a part of fire bending. Come on, you've got to feel the flow. Iroh moved his arms like a worm to emphasize his point. They kept practicing a few more times. Excellent, you've got it, he said when he saw that his nephew's movements had gotten smoother. Great, I'm ready to try it with real lightning, Zuko exclaimed. What? Are you crazy? Lightning is extremely dangerous, he protested. I thought that was the point. You're teaching me how to protect myself from it. That was what the exiled prince thought. How else was he supposed to see if it worked or not? But Iroh had a look of semi-panic on his face. Yeah, but I'm not going to shoot lightning at you. If you're lucky, you will never have to use this technique at all. Frustrated and annoyed, he looked out to the horizon and saw storm clouds gathering. Suddenly, he had an idea. Well, if you won't help me, I'll find my own lightning. He took off on the ostrich horse in the direction of the storm clouds. Hey there, Aang said to the adult animal. We found your cub. He held up Fu Fu to emphasize his point. Then he put him on the ground and watched as he ran into the bush behind his mother. See? We have no problem with you, we're friendly. Mrs. Cuddlypoops didn't seem to agree. She lowered her head and looked like she was about to charge. Aang, I don't think that worked, Sokka warned him. Mrs. Cuddlypoops roared her challenge and charged at them. When she got close to Aang, he bent the air to send over his and Sokka's head. She landed safely and looked like this was about to charge. This is bad, the tribesman said. Get me out so I can fight. I don't think that's, he tried to say. We don't have the time, Aang. Get me out of here, Sokka ordered, cutting him off. He did the earthbending motions, but Sokka was still trapped in the crevice. Meanwhile, Mrs. Cuddlypoops began to paw the ground. Oh no, said Aang before jumping over to a nearby rock. Woohoo, look at me. He started to do a silly dance to get her attention. It didn't work. She charged directly at Sokka, intent on goring him. Realizing what was about to happen, Aang hopped off the rock and knocked her aside via airbending. Again, Mrs. Cuddlypoops landed safely. Please don't leave me like that again, Sokka said. That had been a very scary moment for him. I won't, Aang told him. For the third time, Mrs. Cuddlypoops charged. But this time, he was ready. When she got close, he blasted her with a lot of air, making her skid backwards. She finally got the hint and decided to leave. At that moment, both Sokka and Aang heard someone clapping. Turning their heads to the sound, they saw Toph sitting on nearby rock. What are you doing here? Sokka asked her. Just enjoying the show, she answered. She sounded completely relaxed. What? You were there the whole time? Aang asked her. Pretty much. Why didn't you do something? He demanded, outraged. Sokka was in trouble. I was in trouble. You could have gotten him and helped us get away. Guess it just didn't occur to me. She tossed the nut down to the ground, pulled out Aang's Gilder staff and swung it down to crack the nut. The idea was stopped when Aang grabbed hold of the staff. Enough, I want my staff back. He was sick and tired of her attitude. He wanted what was his and he wanted it now. She let go of the thing and hopped down from the rock. Do it now, she ordered him. What? Earthbend, Twinkletoes, she clarified. You just stood your ground against a crazy beast, and even more impressive, you stood your ground against me. You've got the stuff. But, he tried to protest. Do it! She shouted at him. Angry and annoyed with her for everything that had happened that day, he didn't know what else to do. So he channeled those emotions and did as he was told. He took the stance and pushed a nearby rock. It went sliding away before falling over. You did it! You're an earthbender, Toph told him. I can't believe it, Aang said with joy. He had thought it was difficult, but now it had been easy. Ah, this is really a wonderful, touching moment, Sokka said with subtle sarcasm. So could you get me out of her so I can give both a big, snuggly hug? He was beginning to feel his legs go numb. No problem, Sokka, the Avatar told him. He was about to try and do it when Toph stopped him. Actually, you should probably let me do that. You're still a little new to this. You might accidentally crush him, she warned him. Yeah, no crushing, please, Sokka agreed. He didn't want any crushing happening to him. She walked over, bent him out of the crevice up to his knees and pulled him the rest of the way out by his hair. Later, they got back to the camp area where they met up with Katara, Momo, and Akela. You found him, Katara cried, running over and giving her brother a hug. Sorry about that, he apologized. I was hunting a saber-toothed moose lion cub and ended up being stuck in a hole. He threw a look at his wolf. Don't even start, Akela, he warned. Akela just grinned wolfishly. Hey Katara, look what I can do, Aang called out. He bent a large piece of rock down to the ground. You did it! I knew you would, she told him. She then whispered to Toph. You tried the positive reinforcement, didn't you? Yep, it worked wonders, the earthbender answered. Next time, she would be sure to use it. The resident sky bison decided to make an appearance. Appa, Appa, Aang said excitingly. I can earthbend now. The key is being completely rooted, physically and mentally unmovable. Appa decided to give Aang a big lick, which sent him flying. This sent both him and Sokka into hysterics. Hey guys, Toph called out. Team Guy is back. She could feel them coming through the earth. Sure enough, Team Guy appeared in under a minute. Spread out, we have to find that clone, Guy ordered. Hey, what's going on? Aang asked, making them stop. Naruto had a Kaige Bunshin tracking us since we left Tuzin. If we don't find it before nightfall, it's going to sneak in and kill you, he quickly explained. That's impossible, Toph protested. I would have felt him. There's nobody here except us. She was sure of it. Her feet never lied to her. She's right, Neji said, as he looked around with an activated Byakugan. I don't see anyone except for us. He kept looking around, but he saw no one. Hang on, Tenten said. It's possible that he knows about Toph being able to see via the ground, and he definitely knows about the Byakugan. He might be staying just out of range so that we won't see him. If that's true, we have to look for him now before he gets to us, Guy said. He turned to the others. You four stay here. Under no circumstance should all of you go to sleep. If they did, the clone could easily sneak in and slice their throats. Guy, wait! Sokka yelled, stopping Team Guy before they ran off. What is it? They had to go, and this wasn't the time for distractions. There's a piece of paper in your headband, he pointed out. Guy reached for the piece of paper, opened it, and read what was written. Guy-sensei, what does it say? Lee asked. Guy didn't say anything. He just simply handed the paper to Neji, who read it to the group. You people sure are gullible. There was only the one clone. He was bluffing? Lee asked as if he couldn't believe it. He couldn't have been. Tenten protested. He told us about the hidden clone. No, he didn't, Neji said as he remembered the conversation. He only asked us if we thought the first clone had only made one clone. He also never actually said that he had sent a clone after us. We came to that conclusion ourselves. He must have put the note in my headband during the fight, Guy noted. That means... He stopped talking as all members of Team Guy realized what it meant. It means what? Toph asked. She didn't know what it meant, and she would like some clarification. It means that Naruto knew what we were going to try to do if he tried to leave the fight. He knew that we would threaten to go after the girls. He had his bluff ready before we had even gotten there, Neji explained. He never felt so foolish before. They had been duped into not going after him when they had the chance. Katara then saw that Guy was crying. What's the matter, Guy? What's with the tears? She asked him. He smiled. These are tears of happiness. He really was a fine Konoha shinobi. The storm raged all around Zuko, and yet he stared defiantly at it. You've always thrown everything you could at me. Well, I can take it, and now I can give it back, he yelled. Thunder boomed and lightning struck in the distance, but none of it came near him. Go on, strike me, he roared. You've never held back before. And yet, the storm seemed to mock him. Finally, his tears mixed with the rain, and he howled his frustration to the sky. As he cried on the mountaintop, he heard a voice in the distance. Why? It asked faintly. It sounded like an echo that faded away in the storm. Who's there? Show yourself, Zuko commanded as he rose to his feet. He tried to see who it was talking but saw nothing. Why? It asked again, this time more clearly. What do you mean why? He wasn't sure, but he thought he saw a faint shadow moving in the clouds. He tried to follow the shadow, but lost sight of it. Why do you do this? What are you trying to prove? That I am not as weak as everyone thinks I am. To prove I don't have to fear lightning. And, he silently added, to also prove that he wasn't afraid of his sister. Thunder boomed, but oddly enough, there was no lightning. The voice chuckled. You should always fear lightning, boy, fear it and respect it, the voice chastised him as the shadow reappeared. He kept his eyes fixed on that shadow, trying not to lose it. If you want to say something, then come out and face me instead of hiding like a coward, he ordered with all the authority he could muster. Insolent child! Roared the voice, suddenly enraged. Before the prince's eyes he saw a pair of solid gold eyes flash briefly in the storm clouds. Do you not know who you insult? If you wish so much to be struck by lightning, then come and take it. He heard a bestial roar before he saw a large stream of lightning coming directly at him. He quickly took the stance his uncle showed him. But then he realized something just as the lightning struck. He realized that the booming of thunder sounded more like the flapping of wings. He took the lightning in through his arm and let it travel down, but it wasn't easy. It felt like his entire body was being tortured. Arg! The pain! It's too much! Let it stop, dear Agni, let it stop! His mind screamed as it was clouded by pain. He felt like he couldn't hold on, that he would die if it went on. But as the lightning was about to reach his heart, he broke through the cloud of pain. No! I will not die because of this. He then forced the lightning down into his stomach and then up into his other arm. And then, he threw the lightning in the same direction it came. As it disappeared and the echo faded away, he stood just there, panting in the rain and trying to get his breath back. Then he heard the voice again, and this time it was laughing. It has been a long time since someone has insulted me to my face, and an even longer time since someone has tried to fight me. You remind me so much of him, it said. It didn't sound enraged anymore, more like it was fondly remembering something. Who's him? Zuko asked cautiously. Lightning struck down in front of him, making him leap back. But what he saw surprised him. In the exact spot where the lightning struck stood another Zuko. It was the same face, the eyes, and the same build. But that was where the similarities ended. To start off, Zuko could see through him a little bit, so he knew that it was a shade. He wore an ancient set of armor, and his hair was tied back in a braid. But it was the scars that set him apart. Like Zuko, his left eye had been burned. But unlike Zuko, his right eye has also been burned, giving him an almost mask-like appearance. Who is that? Is that me? The exiled prince asked. No, but you are related to him, the voice told him. How? He asked, idly wondering how the voice was sure of that. He looked closer and saw that the shade wore something familiar around his neck. That's the Fire Nation Paragon Medallion. This man was a paragon of the Fire Nation. He was the first. He was a good man, the voice said, the fondness becoming more obvious. He looked out into the storm again, looking for the shadow. Who are you? He called out, wanting to know. Again, the eyes showed themselves. This time, they came with a head. It was vague and covered by the storm clouds, but he could tell it was a dragon's head. I am the dragon that many search for, but only a few will meet. You have joined those few. The head, eyes, and voice disappeared, and the storm kept on raining, this time without the thunder and lightning. Zuko fell to the ground in surprise. He had just insulted, talked to, and threw lightning at a legendary dragon that his great-grandfather, grandfather, and father had all searched for in their youth. He had just met the Dragon King, the firstborn of Agni, Bahamut. Chapter 8, Zuko in Command. Location: Earth Kingdom. Zuko and Iroh rode on the ostrich horse in silence. It had been more than a week since Zuko learned how to redirect lightning. They decided to head back to the western coast of the Earth Kingdom to avoid Azula and Naruto. Going after the Avatar was the farthest thing from their minds now. Are you all right, nephew? Iroh asked, noticing that he was unnaturally silent. Zuko had been staring straight ahead in a trance. His uncle's question snapped him out of it. Huh? What? He asked, blinking his eyes. The sound of waves crashing against the shore filled his ears momentarily. I asked if you were all right. Yeah, I'm fine, he answered. I just have a lot on my mind. He briefly wondered if that was an understatement. You've been acting like this ever since you back from the storm. What happened out there? He didn't really know how to put it. How could anyone say that they had met the Dragon King? I just ran into someone I wasn't expecting, he said, the waves fading away somewhat in his ears. Oh? Who was it? Asked a curious Iroh. I can't say. He just couldn't find the right words for it. His uncle was silent for a few minutes. Very well, if you do not wish to tell me, I will not ask, he finally said. It was none of his business to intrude on something his nephew didn't wish to talk about. "Thank you, Uncle," Zuko said. He stopped the ostrich horse. As they got down, he reached for the map. "Anyway, we're low on supplies and the only town that is nearby is the Fire Nation colony of Akawan." He turned to face his uncle. "Should we risk it? They could be found out, and having word sent to Azula." "Perhaps we should. It would be nice to be back in civilization for a little while," Iroh said, already wondering if the colony had any good tea. Zuko put the map away and they climbed back on the ostrich horse. An hour later, they arrived at Akawan. The colony was important to the Fire Nation. While Yu Dao made the finest metals, Akawan was the Fire Nation's access into the Earth Kingdom. It was their most important harbor, not just for the military, but also for trade. Zuko and Iroh rode through the city gate, keeping their faces hidden from the guards, and headed into a nearby market. "Perhaps it is best if I went for the supplies," Iroh said as they dismounted. "People won't recognize another old man in the market." Zuko wanted to argue, but he could see the logic. So, he nodded in agreement and let his uncle leave to get the supplies. Left alone, Zuko just watched the crowd go by. As he watched several people greet one another, he couldn't help but reminisce. "This all reminds me of the day we actually met Naruto." Flashback. "Uncle, can we go talk to the stranger now?" Zuko asked Iroh as he left the room where the stranger was. "He's been cooped up in that room for over a day." They were all getting impatient, even Azula, despite repeatedly denying the claim. Before Iroh could answer, they heard a voice from behind the door. "Shouldn't you be asking me that question?" Stepping away from the door, Iroh revealed Naruto. The clothes he originally wore were ruined, so he had to borrow some of Zuko's clothes. The shirt looked a bit loose and big on him. "You're up after only a day in bed?" Zuko asked, surprised. He would have thought more time was going to be needed. "I heal quickly," Naruto lied easily. Like he was going to tell his secret to a couple of people he just met, and introduced himself. "In any case, my name is Naruto Uzumaki." "Oh, right. I'm Zuko, Prince of the Fire Nation. Come on, everybody else wants to meet you." He ran off and Naruto followed. Azula, Mai and Ty Lee had been waiting in the backyard when he came running out of the house. "He's awake!" Ty Lee hopped up from where she was sitting. "Then where is he?" she asked excitedly. "Right here," Naruto stated, appearing behind Zuko. He jumped at his voice. "Whoa! Don't sneak up on people like that," he protested. That had really surprised him. The blonde laughed sheepishly. Sorry, he apologized, scratching the back of his head. Azula and the girls took a long look at the newcomer. Like Azula had said, his hair was blonde, his eyes were blue, and he had whisker-like birthmarks on his face. But what she didn't mention was the fact that his eyes were the kind of blue that put the ocean to shame, or that the color of his hair almost seemed to be the same color of the sun, or that the whiskers were almost begging to be touched. They had different reactions. Mai just ignored him, Ty Lee openly ogled him, and Azula had a look of disinterest. "Well, what's your name?" she asked. "It's Naruto Uzumaki." "Are you Azula?" he asked her, trying to be friendly. "That's Princess Azula to you, peasant," she snapped at him. Didn't he know the proper terms of respect? He was a little offended by those words but moved on. "Thanks for getting me out of the water. I might have died if it wasn't for you." She turned away to hide a faint blush. The only person who saw it was Iroh. "Whatever," she said curtly. "Okay then," ignoring the rather rude princess over there. "Excuse me?" she demanded, whipping her head back to look at him. For a moment, it felt like everything had gone silent. He turned to look at her. "You heard me, you were rather rude. Do I have to put in deaf as well?" he asked, mockingly sarcastic. "You shut your mouth, peasant. How dare he talk to her like that? She was a princess. Make me, you arrogant little." At that point in the conversation, they both were whacked in the head by Iroh. "Both of you are being rude," he told them sternly. "Now apologize." "Sorry," Azula muttered. She didn't really mean it, but she wasn't going to let her uncle know that. "Sorry back," the blonde said. He noticed that Ty Lee was ogling him. Is there something on my face?" If there was, he was going to be really embarrassed. "No, you're just really cute," she chirped. What?" he asked, shocked as he began to blush. "You heard me, you're really cute," she repeated herself. "Not really, no. I'm not that cute," he denied. He was just ordinary. None of the girls back in Konoha had ever paid attention to him. Then again, they had all been paying attention to Sasuke. This boy will have the girls flocking to him if he keeps that attitude, Iroh noted. If they gave him a few years, he would go from cute to handsome, and if he kept that attitude, the girls wouldn't be able to leave him alone. The acrobat paused suddenly. That's strange. You have 2 auras. I'm sorry? Naruto asked, confused. What do you mean by auras? Zuko decided to help. Ty Lee thinks she can see people's auras and can tell their emotions from the color, he explained. Personally, he was a bit skeptical about the whole idea. I don't think, she objected. I know I can see auras and you have 2 of them. She pointed at Naruto to emphasize her point. I don't have any idea what you're talking about, he told her. Kyuubi, I don't know how you're going to do it, but stop making her notice you, he told the fox. He didn't know if the Kyuubi did it, but he wasn't focusing on that right now. Just let it go, Ty Lee, Mai told her. You're making him uncomfortable. She could see, and she knew her friend could see it too. The difference was that she knew Ty Lee would try to press the issue. That was why she decided to intervene. The acrobat gave a huff and began to pout. Fine, she grumbled, a little annoyed at the lost chance. Naruto turned to Mai. Thanks for that. You are. He trailed off, waiting for an answer. Mai, she stated simply. After a couple of seconds, it was clear that was all she was going to say to him. So where are you from? Zuko asked, deciding to keep the conversation going. You don't look like you're from the bending countries. Dum-Dum's right, where are you from? Azula asked the blonde. Her words, however, made her brother mad. Don't call me that, Azula! He shouted at her. She just ignored him, focusing on the stranger. That just made him madder. I am from somewhere else, Naruto told them, trying to stop the fight before it began. So why did you come here? She asked with genuine curiosity. Because I wanted to, he told her, deflecting the question. He didn't want to answer that question, and he wasn't going to. Before she could press him, Iroh stepped in. That's enough introductions. How about some tea? He suggested with a small grin. After a little groaning, everyone did take a cup of tea. End flashback. As Zuko watched the crowd, time seemed to slip away. So, it didn't feel long to him when he saw Iroh walking back to him. Did you get everything we need? He immediately asked. It looked like it, with all the bags his uncle was carrying. Yes, but there is a slight problem, Iroh told him. The gate closed a few minutes after we came in. We will have to stay the night. He gritted his teeth. Agni! He swore. That wasn't what he wanted. He wanted to be in and out of Akawan once they had the supplies. He didn't want to stay in a place where they could be easily found. It was too risky. Calm yourself, Zuko. I have taken measures and got us rooms at an inn for the night. Iroh began to walk down the street. Follow me. Zuko took the reins of the ostrich horse and followed as they walked through the street, trying to avoid people's gazes. When does the gate open in the morning? So impatient, nephew, his uncle said with a chuckle. Don't you want to enjoy a bit of the city life? He gestured to the people around them. They were all going somewhere, and the paces they took were varied. But there was a kind of energy among them. It wasn't visible, but it was there. Uncle, please remember that this is a Fire Nation colony, and we're fugitives. They couldn't afford to stay here. If someone recognizes us, Azula will be notified. And your idea of city life would be to find the nearest tea shop and drink every kind of tea the shop has. When Iroh said nothing in his defense, he groaned and put his head in his free hand. How close is it? Iroh looked at him. What do you mean? He asked with an innocent expression that they both knew was faked. How close is the tea shop to the inn? Oh, it's right next to it. Zuko took a deep breath to calm himself down. I am just wondering if they have a different kind of tea from the ones we are used to. Fine, he said. He wasn't going to win this agreement. Just promise me that you won't be so critical about their tea. That way, we can avoid another debacle like the one 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when Zuko had just started on his quest for the Avatar, they had docked at a new Fire Nation colony. After restocking the supplies, the entire crew went to a tea shop to relax. Iroh had taken one sip of the tea and spat it out. He demanded to see the owner, and when said owner appeared, the Dragon of the West proceeded to chew him out about his lack of knowledge on tea. The local military arrived and attempted to arrest Iroh. The crew stopped their attempt, and the end result was a brawl in the tea shop. They had to flee back to the ship when reinforcements showed up. His uncle winced. Are you ever going to forget about that? You almost had us arrested over one bad cup of tea, Zuko said in an accusing tone. If they had been caught, it would have been an embarrassment. Can you imagine the scandal that would have reached my father back home? He would have ordered our execution. And yet, we all managed to get back to the ship safely, Iroh pointed out. It was also one of the few times that you and Lieutenant G worked together. The two of you were the last ones to get on the ship. They had made sure everyone else had gotten on first. He fell silent, remembering the lieutenant and the crew. The last time he had heard of the crew was that they had been conscripted into Zhao's foolhardy siege of the Northern Water Tribe. Do you think they made all it out of the siege? He asked. It's possible, since Naruto showed up and ordered everyone to return to the ships, his uncle admitted. But beyond that, I don't know. They arrived at the inn, and once they had put the supplies and ostrich horse away, they quickly went to bed. He knew where he was. He was on Ember Island. He could buy the fact that the nearby beach was the one he used to play on as a child. In fact, he saw himself as a little boy ran by and onto the beach. Such a carefree life you once lived, a voice spoke out, echoing around him. He turned around to look for the person who spoke. Even though he didn't see who it was, he knew that voice. Lord Bahamut? He said aloud. He heard a deep chuckle for a response. From calling me a coward to calling me Lord Bahamut, the voice mused. What brought this about? Well, I don't think it's every day one talks to the Dragon King, he explained, feeling a little sheepish about it all. And I apologize about what happened on the mountaintop. Don't worry about it. I won't hold it against you. Zuko watched as his younger self tried to build a sandcastle. Why am I watching this? He asked. He was a little confused. So, you can understand something. Your uncle told you that there is energy everywhere. So? What does an attempt to generate lightning have to do with a childhood memory? There wasn't any connection that he knew of. It just made him even more confused. Every firebender who has been able to generate lightning has always taken energy from the same place. There are other ways to generate lightning. Look over there. Despite not actually seeing a finger pointing in a direction, Zuko knew where to look. He turned to look at the cliff wall and saw, standing against it, was the blue spirit. What's he doing here? He wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't even exist until Zuko had already been hunting for the Avatar for 2 years. He's a clue, just like your younger self is a clue. Find out what they mean and learn what they can teach you, the voice of Bahamut told him. He woke up to the sound of bells ringing throughout the colony. What's going on? He asked Iroh, leaping out of his bed. I don't know. But I know that those are the warning bells, he replied, getting out of his bed as well. Whenever those kinds of bells went off, it usually meant that the colony or city was being attacked. Zuko grabbed his swords and secured them across his back. Come on, we need to know what's going on. His uncle nodded in agreement. The two of them ran out of the inn only to find pandemonium was running wild. People were screaming and fleeing deeper into the city, trying to get away from something. What's going on? Zuko asked a nearby person, grabbing hold of him. It's General Fong's army. They're attacking the colony, he screamed. He broke free and followed the crowd. Soldiers were trying to coordinate the masses with limited success. Get to the shelters. Somebody, a soldier and a firebender, judging by his armor and lack of weapons, ordered the people. Some of them listened to his words and changed course, heading to where the shelters presumably were. Others were caught by the change of flow, and were brought along while the rest just ran away. As they ran, a nearby house collapsed. Earthbenders appeared and began to attack the civilians. Nearby Fire Nation soldiers engaged them, but they weren't well coordinated. They were slowly being pushed back, but the civilians did manage to get away. Zuko didn't waste any time and joined the fight. He drew his swords and saved a nearby firebender, stabbing his attacker in the chest and then beheaded him. As he fought, Iroh grabbed the nearest soldier to him. Who's in charge here? He asked the man urgently. I don't know, sir, the soldier replied. They went after the higher-ranked officers first. We've been given no orders, so we don't know what to do. It was obvious that the man was close to panicking and running away. He was terrified and didn't know what to do. Keep it together, son, he barked out. He looked at the rest of the Fire Nation soldiers. All firebenders, break up the enemy troops, don't let them keep formation. All non-bender troops get in close and push them back. He ordered, old and familiar authority coming back into his voice. Who are you to give orders? A nearby soldier asked. To them, he was just an old man who just started giving orders. My name is Iroh. With those words, the entire street fell silent. Everyone there, except for his nephew, stared at him. As they did, the soldiers of the Fire Nation began to hold hope in their hearts again. It's the Dragon of the West. An earthbender cried out. The Earth Kingdom soldiers didn't feel hope when they heard those words. They felt fear, having heard of the infamous son of Fire Lord Azula. Iroh simply smiled amusingly as the Earth Kingdom soldiers began to falter. Zuko took advantage of the silence. You heard the general, he shouted, using his uncle's old rank. Push them back. The Fire Nation soldiers bellowed in agreement and charged their enemy. The fact that one of their nation's war heroes was there drove them forward. Uncle, we're going to need reinforcements, he said, looking over at the Dragon of the West. Can you go find someone to do that? That is sound thinking, nephew, Iroh complimented him before heading quickly down the open street, away from the battle. You're his nephew? A nearby soldier asked, staring at his face in surprised realization. The attention of everyone there now turned to him. You're. No time for that, soldier, Zuko told him, cutting him off. We've got a job to do. His voice seemed to swell in volume as authority he didn't think was his came forth. He attacked the Earthbenders again, and the soldiers of the Fire Nation joined him. The tactics that Iroh had issued worked for them. The enemy's Earthbenders tried to separate the Firebenders and non-benders by bending a wall between them. However, because they were being attacked, it wasn't a large wall, only a few scant feet long. It didn't stop the Fire Nation soldiers for long. Some of them went over the wall, some went around, and some followed Zuko's example and burst through the wall via fire bending. Eventually, they weren't sure how it took them, but the Fire Nation soldiers pushed them back to the city gate. There Zuko saw that the 4 other streets were fighting as well. Reinforcements for the Earth Kingdom army were coming through the gate, filling the square beyond. They were coming in fast, and their ranks seemed to swell. Sir! Cried a soldier as he ran up to Zuko. We've just received news from command. General Iroh has dispatched the Yuan archers to the gate as well as some cavalry. It'll take some time for the cavalry to get here, but the archers are coming in fast from the rooftops. He nodded in acknowledgement, glad to hear that. Tell the Yuan archers I want them to stay up there. Have them thin out the enemy's numbers in the other streets, so the troops can push through. After that, have them get onto the walls and aim for the reinforcements. Yes, sir, said the soldier before saluting and running off. The rest of them began to look at him with questioning looks. He realized that they had unconsciously looked to him orders. What are your orders, sir? Another soldier asked him. I want you men to assist the other streets. Attack the enemy from behind so they have to deal with attacks from 2 directions, he ordered. Then he pointed at a small group of firebenders. Except for you lot. You will follow my lead, he told them as the rest of the soldiers split off to attack the other streets. What are we going to do, sir? One of the firebenders asked. He sheathed his swords, not caring if they were bloody. Something incredibly stupid. He charged directly at the city gate, bending fire into his palms, and letting it cover his hands. He attacked the incoming reinforcements with full use of his fire bending. After a moment of hesitation, the soldiers followed him, bellowing war cries and bending fire. The gate was narrow, which helped them tremendously. It forced the enemy soldiers to come at them piecemeal, unable to overwhelm them with superior numbers. Even when they fell, they still fought on. And they held out long enough. Get out of the way, boys! A nearby soldier yelled. The rhinos are coming through. They pulled back into the colony and out of the way of the cavalry. They came through and smashed into the enemy troops. Already weary from being blocked by Zuko and the firebenders, they fell back into a retreat. Amidst a chorus of victory cheers coming from the soldiers, Zuko was found by the leader of the Yuan archers. General Iroh wants you at the command center, sir, he told the exiled prince. Zuko nodded and followed the archer, leaving the gate, the square, and the soldiers behind. How bad is it? He asked. He had briefly seen that the other streets which had been blocked off were free and any Earth Kingdom that remained was corpses. But that wasn't the only thing that caught his attention. Many of the surrounding buildings, built with red and green colors that didn't conflict with one another, had been damaged in the attack, Not a lot were completely ruined, but there were some that had completely collapsed. Casualties were surprisingly light, the archer replied. But I don't think that what General Fong had in mind. Every officer the rank of colonel, or above, was killed. My guess is he went after them first to spread confusion within our ranks. Then it's a good thing General Iroh was here, he commented. If his uncle hadn't been here, it might have been a lot worse. The archer stopped and turned to face him. I have heard some of the soldiers talk about how the general called you his nephew. Is it true? He kept silent, so the archer turned back around and continued walking. I will not push you for answers, but I must warn you. If you are his nephew, then don't expect a warm welcome here. What do you mean? Zuko asked. Those words were cryptic and didn't make much sense. But the archer stayed silent, and so they continued walking until they reached at the command center, a building that looked unimportant, but stood in the center of the colony. Iroh stood outside waiting for them. Here he is, General, the archer said, saluting. If you'll excuse, I must get back to my men. Thank you, Lieutenant Baoyu. You may go, Iroh told him. He saluted again and left. As the archer left, Zuko faced his uncle. That was good timing on your part, uncle, he said, relief coating his words. The rhinos arrived just in time. He hadn't been sure how much longer he and the group of firebenders would have lasted. From some of the reports I've been getting, they probably weren't needed. The enemy was already outside the colony when they arrived, Iroh replied with a pointed look at his nephew. I did what I had to do. He looked at the building that held the command center. It didn't look like a command center, but perhaps that was the point. How many officers did you have to go through in order for them to believe your identity? Iroh gave a smile. Actually, I only had to talk to one person, and he allowed me to take command immediately, he said with an amused laugh. Who was he? He would have thought the officers would try to override his uncle's orders and imprison him at the earliest opportunity. A familiar face, to be honest, you know him as well. He led Zuko into the building, walking through the corridors of the place. When they reached the map room, Iroh opened the door and Zuko's eyes widened in surprise. Lieutenant G, he blurted out, looking at the man's back. Lieutenant G turned to see who was at the door. Well, at least we know who was leading the soldiers at the gate, he simply stated. You made out of the siege, Zuko said as he walked into the room. He was happy to see the man again, he was just still surprised. Yes sir, me and the crew. Although it's not lieutenant anymore, it's captain. You've been promoted? He knew it was an obvious and rhetorical question. But he asked it anyway. The new captain nodded. My promotion was given when our ship docked in the harbor, and we reported to the commanding officer. But given the present circumstances, I think it's safe to say that I am currently the highest-ranking officer in the colony of Akawan. He made it sound like it was something horrible. What of the mayor? He didn't know much of the Akawan mayor. But what he did know was that the man had served in the military before retiring to the colony. He was killed as well. He turned to face Iroh. General Iroh, given the circumstances, I think it would be best if you took command. If it was known that the Dragon of the West was in command, he was sure the Earth Kingdom general would hesitate in attacking again. Iroh shook his head. While he could see what the man had been thinking of, he could also see a flaw in the plan. Besides you, Captain G, no one here has served under me and they have all heard of what happened at Ba Sing Se. They'll question my orders because of that. And they did not need that. Then who do you think should lead, sir? He asked. He stood silent as he thought it over. Perhaps it would be best if Zuko leads, the Dragon of the West finally said. What? Said both G and Zuko in surprise. No doubt, stories about the person who effortlessly took command in the streets, and retook the city gate with only a handful of soldiers are already spreading. If we say that he has taken command until reinforcements arrive, then the soldiers would be pleased, he explained. But sir, the soldiers have also heard that the Dragon of the West is here and so is his nephew. There is a good chance that it will have the opposite effect if we announce that he has taken command, G argued. It is a chance that we will have to take. Go tell the remaining officers and have them inform the soldiers, Iroh ordered. G saluted and left the room. Uncle, why would my being in command be a problem with the soldiers? Asked Zuko as they heard the captain's footsteps fade away. He never knew any soldier of the Fire Nation to have any problem with him. It is something I learned when I arrived. The entire military force in the colony of Akawan is composed of the 41st Division, his uncle told him grimly. He went still at those words. The 41st Division. It was the division that was the discussion of that fateful meeting, the division that he had spoken in defense for, and it was the division that earned him the scar on his left eye. Most of the officers of the 41st Division had been transferred to other divisions within the Fire Nation military, leaving it with officers that have no political ambition. Consequently, the 41st Division became a dumping ground for Fire Nation officers who fell out of favor with the Fire Lord. Perhaps it's best if we got some rest. It does not look like we will be leaving the colony soon, Iroh suggested. Zuko nodded numbly in agreement. He left and was able to find a room with a bed before falling asleep. He wasn't on Ember Island this time. Thus time he stood in the center of the Agni Kai chamber in the royal palace. So you're in command of a division now, a voice spoke out. Turning his head, he saw the blue spirit was standing on one end of the chamber floor. Congratulations. His voice sounded like it was both sarcastic and angry at something. Don't listen to him. Another voice cried out. It was coming from the other end of the chamber floor. This time, when he turned his head to see who was talking, he saw himself as a little boy. You should be glad that they put you in charge, they must think you're quite something. Or they're so bloody desperate that they'll put anyone in charge, the blue spirit growled. If that's true, then why isn't Uncle Iroh in charge? His younger self challenged. Uncle said it himself? Men do not want to follow a disgraced leader. He turned his gaze on Zuko. Which is exactly what you are, you coward. No, he's not. You leave him alone, he's going to have to choose sooner or later. I say we force his hand and make him choose now. Zuko decided to open his mouth. What do I have to choose? What are you two talking about? He asked the two of them. What they said made no sense. They both looked at him and opened their mouths, but nothing came from them. As he was awoken by the morning bells, he quickly got out of the bed. As he stretched and finished waking up, the door to the room opened and Bao Yu entered. Sir, General Iroh asks if you would like to join him for tea this morning along with breakfast, the Yen archer told him. He was in civilian clothes and did not have the face paint on. Finished with his stretching, he went over to the wardrobe and began to get dressed, pulling out clothes that were plain, but functional. Did he specify where I should meet him? He asked. For all he knew, Iroh was out in the colony hunting for good tea. There is a room adjacent to the kitchen. He will meet you there. Thank you. He stepped away from the wardrobe, fully clothed. Care to join us? He offered. It would have been rude not to extend the offer. The general has already made the offer. I've accepted, the lieutenant told him. If you would please follow me. They walked out of the room. Lieutenant, may I ask you something? Zuko asked the archer as they walked. What is it you want to know? Why do you wear the ancient symbol for fire? I thought that only the paragons knew of those symbols. It was something that made him curious. Do you know the history of the Yen archers? The lieutenant asked him as they passed a few soldiers on a staircase. No, I'm afraid not, Zuko admitted, avoiding eye contact with the soldiers as they passed. He didn't know what the situation was right now with them, so he tried to be cautious. According to our history, the first Yen archers were trained by the first paragon of the Fire Nation. The paragon was a hunter at first, and was gifted with both the bow and the sword. In the later years of his life, he began to pass on his teachings of the bow to those who wished to learn. They became the first Yen archers. We wear the ancient symbol for fire as well as the face paint to show who it was that taught us in the beginning, Bao Yu explained. The face paint, how does that symbolize the first paragon? Much like you, sir, the first paragon had been burned by fire. But instead of one eye being burned, both eyes were burned. Over the years, the face paint has been formalized, but it still represents where the paragon had been burned. Zuko stayed silent for a second. Does Naruto know of your relationship with the paragons? He finally asked. Bao Yu nodded. When a new paragon is named, we swear our allegiance to them. A Yen archer is loyal to the paragon first, and the Fire Nation second. So if Naruto told you to go attack Ba Sing Se, he left the question hanging. We would be on the boat leaving for the Earth Kingdom within minutes, the archer answered without hesitation. Is that all? Yes. They walked into the room and went over to the table where Iroh was sitting. Uncle, he greeted. Nephew, Iroh greeted in return. And Lieutenant Bao Yu, please sit. They sat down. As soon as they did, servants came in, carrying food and tea. So, Prince Zuko, what are you planning to do this day? He thought it over as he ate. On going to the walls and examine the defenses as well as the surrounding land before visiting the barracks, he finally decided. You're not going to take the time to relax? His uncle asked with a look of surprise that everyone knew wasn't real. He frowned. Uncle, you've put me in command of a colony and a military force. I won't have time to relax. Spoken like a true leader of men, the Dragon of the West said with approval. That had been the right thing to say. I recommend you be careful when visiting the barracks, Baoyu told Zuko. 3 years ago, the 41st Division was about to be deployed to the front lines when a messenger came. He announced that because of the prince's actions, the 41st were regulated to defending the colonies indefinitely. Some of them blame you for that. I see he finished his tea and his breakfast before getting up. Then I'd better get to work. He stepped away from the table and walked out of the room. Both Iroh and Baoyu stayed and continued to have breakfast. Does the Fire Lord know of what has happened? Iroh asked, being all business. A messenger hawk was sent after the attack last night, Baoyu answered. Reinforcements will be here within 6 days. Hopefully, Zuko will be able to defend the colony that long. He prayed to Agni that his nephew would be able to do so. If General Fong is really as good as some of our soldiers say, then 6 days is not something we can afford. I'm more concerned with how the soldiers treat him. If things went badly, things might become bloody. He walked along the wall, taking in the surrounding land. As he looked at everything that surrounded the colony, he tried to think how it would work for him. As that thought crossed his mind, he was reminded of something else that happened on Ember Island. Flashback. Zuko stood in front of the backyard with his Sifu, Piandao. You want me to manipulate the backyard to my advantage? He asked, just to be sure. Piandao just nodded. What's the matter, Zuzu? Azula called out. Can't do it? I guess this means you're not that good at swords either, dum-dum. Zuko turned around and scowled at her. Then he noticed where she was standing. Sifu, what if my advantage was to help someone else on the battlefield? It is the same thing. It is your advantage, Piandao told him. Zuko then motioned Naruto to come over. He whispered something in his ear and they both had mischievous grins on their faces. Zuko moved 2 big rocks in front of a tree. Naruto then ran up to and jumped from said rocks to land on the tree. He jumped to another tree that had a branch hanging over the house. He landed on the house and knocked over the bucket that was up there on purpose. The bucket tipped and spilled its contents onto Azula, completely soaking her. Zuko grinned at a wet and stunned Azula. What was that about not being able to do it? End flashback. That was one of the few times I got Azula, he remembered fondly. He heard the midday bell ring. It had taken him most of the morning to look at the defenses. He headed down the stairs to the colony, and decided that before he looked for a place to eat, he should visit the barracks. As he walked through the streets, generally avoiding people's gazes, he ran into Ji. Captain, he said in greeting, saluting him. Prince Zuko, Ji replied, returning the salute. Are you heading somewhere in particular? I was going to the colony barracks. Just by listening to those words, the captain knew it was not going to be an easy visit. If you'll allow me, sir, I'll take you to it, he offered. He was relieved to hear that. He hadn't had any idea where the barracks were, and his plan to get to them had amount of walking around until he found it. Thank you. Please lead the way. They started to walk down, staying clear of other people. What's my uncle doing? He asked as they walked. He's found some of the old crew and is playing Pai Sho with them, Ji told him, a little amused at the idea. He shook his head. Will they ever learn? They had been on the same ship with his uncle for 3 years, and every time they played Pai Sho against him, they lost badly. In their defense, the last time I checked they lasted longer, the captain said in reply, defending their motives. Zuko chuckled at that. He found that to be slightly funny. Theirs was a hopeless situation, and yet, they kept coming back for more. But his chuckle faded away as they kept walking through streets of Akawan. Doubts began to fill his mind, making him begin to wonder. They will never accept you, the voice of the blue spirit hissed inside his head, acting on those doubts. You should make an example of them, humiliate them. No, you shouldn't, his younger self warned him. Put yourself on your knees and ask for forgiveness. Apologize for your actions. He would have you choose the path of a coward, the blue spirit told him with a harsh voice. And he would have you be a tyrant. Just what are you two? He asked, wanting to know the answer to that question. I thought it was obvious, young Zuko said. I am the one who stands in the light with hope and determination. And I am the one who stands in the darkness with rage and hatred. You two are different parts of me, he realized. You're two parts of the same coin. They didn't respond, which, to Zuko, meant he was right. Then he saw what he was standing in front, Akawan's military barracks. Are you ready, sir? She asked him as they looked at the barracks gate. Let's go, he simply said. They walked through the gate and onto the training ground. As they walked in, the call was given to fall in. Both Ji and Zuko watched as the troops fell into ranks. Soldiers, Ji called out, have you already been told about who has taken command? Yeah, it's the person who's responsible for having us kept away from the front lines. A voice angrily called out. So now he's here to lead us? Ji was about to speak when Zuko stepped forward. If you have something to say, then come and say it to my face, he called out. If he was going to lead, he couldn't show any weakness. The soldiers moved out of the way, so the person who spoke out could come forward. It was a big man who seemed to tower over him. You're the exiled prince? You're Zuko? He demanded. Yes, I am, Zuko admitted. What's your name, soldier? It's Xing. But don't think that because you know my name, it means we're on friendly terms, he growled out. In fact, I would rather like to see you dead in a ditch somewhere. Why? Xing stepped forward and, shocking everyone, buried his fist into the exiled prince's stomach, sending him to the ground. I hate you for what you did to us, Xing told him, looking down at his prone body. It is because of you that we have never seen the front lines. It is because of you that we are known as the Cowards Division in the entire Fire Nation army. It is because of you we will never have an emblem on that flag. Our division is constantly getting incompetent and disgraced officers to lead us, thanks to you. Neither will we have a nickname for the division. He pointed to the division's flag, which was just a red flag. For any division in the Fire Nation, to have no emblem or no nickname counted among the highest shames they could have. Sheng, stand down, Ji ordered. If this continued, he couldn't be sure if Zuko would live. Shing gave a snort, turned around, and walked away. He stopped when someone grabbed his arm tightly. He turned back around and was met with a fist in the face. He fell to the ground, dazed and in no small amount of pain. He was grabbed and brought up close to Zuko's scarred face. So, you consider me to be worthy of your never-ending hatred, is that it? He asked. His eyes seemed to blaze with an inner fire. You hate me for my actions? What if my actions saved this entire division's lives from a pointless massacre? Did you ever think of that? He let go, letting the soldier fall down again, and turned to face the rest of the 41st. Listen, all of you. I know that you were denied the chance to go to the front lines. But do you what caused that? I do. The soldiers were silent. No one dared to speak. I was there when they discussed how this division was to be used. They were going to send you to the slaughter. You were to be used as bait when you were all new recruits. The general who came up with this plan said what could be better bait than fresh meat. Now they were shocked. They didn't know that piece of information. Zuko continued, his glare did not change a single bit. I was the only one who spoke out against the plan. I said that the division loved and defended the Fire Nation. I asked them how they could betray them like that. Do you know what the result of my outburst was? He pointed to his left eye. This is what my father gave me because I stood up for this division. He went silent, trying to calm his breathing. He then noticed that Xing was trying to get up. He held out a hand. Xing took the offered hand and stood back up. I have denied you the chance to fight on the front lines and I have denied you the chance to put an emblem on your flag. I will admit to that. But I promise you this. You will have your emblem by the time the reinforcements come. He may have wanted to originally get in and out of the colony as he could. But now, he was in command and he would come through with that promise. Suddenly, the warning bells went off, filling the air with their sound. We've got incoming Earth Kingdom soldiers. They'll be here within minutes. A sentry cried out from a nearby tower. He looked up at the sentry, and then back at the soldiers. The enemy is coming right now. Are you willing to stand by me and fight them together? He asked them. Xing looked at the soldiers and looked back at Zuko. Sir, if you went to face Agni himself, we would be right behind you, he stated, speaking for all of them. Zuko smiled. Then why don't we explain to these Earth Kingdom rockheads why they should fear the 41st Division of the Fire Nation? He turned to the soldiers. What say you? He asked in a shout. He got an incredibly positive, Very loud chorus of agreement. Frankly, what most of the soldiers said was hell yeah, sir. Gee, I need you to send relay commands from the command center. Notify my uncle and have him help you, he told the man as the soldiers moved out of the barracks and to the defenses. Yes, sir. G automatically replied, saluting. But what will you do? I'll be on the wall. It's best to lead by example. He followed the troops, and the captain followed the orders given. Where are they? Zuko asked, arriving at the top of the wall. All around him, soldiers were standing and waiting. They're still incoming, sir, one of them answered, pointing out to the field. The enemy wasn't moving. They just stood there like nothing could touch them. They're out of arrow and fire range, sir, Shing told him, appearing by his side. The big man now carried a pike in his hands. He gauged the distance and smiled when he figured out how far they were. There is something that can hit them. Are the trebuchets loaded? There were trebuchets positioned along the walls, often used to break apart enemy siege weapons. Yes, sir, the soldier answered. Tell them to adjust their settings, and when I give the signal, rain fire, he ordered. 30 archers appeared, accompanied by 25 spearmen, as Zuko thought of a plan. After the trebuchets fire, all the archers are to knock arrows. Shing saluted before heading out to give the orders. He returned quickly. They're ready, sir. Zuko raised his hand and the soldiers on the wall fell silent. The Earth Kingdom army began yelling out catcalls and taunts, trying to goad the soldiers in the colony into action. Finally, they fell silent, and that was when Zuko dropped his hand. The trebuchets flung their payload onto the enemy forces, sending boulders that were set ablaze into the sky. They soon realized that to avoid being crushed by a flaming hunk of rock, they had to move forward, which they did with gusto. But Zuko had been planning on that. Archers! He called out. Knock! The archers drew back their bowstrings. Drawl, they aimed their arrows high. Zuko exhaled as the Earth Kingdom soldiers continued to come. Loose! A decent amount of the enemy forces died from the hail of arrows, but they kept coming. The artillery teams began hurling their rock salvos at the walls. They smashed against the walls, but the walls held. The rocks that hit the top of the walls also took some of the troops. Stay calm! Zuko barked at them all. If you run, you're only making yourself an easier target. He watched as the enemy got even closer. Firebenders, take your stances, he ordered. He took his stance as the rest of the firebenders did the same. When the enemy soldiers reached the bottom of the wall, he acted. Roast them! He and the rest of the firebenders bent a wall of fire down on them. The screams that followed did not stop the Earth Kingdom army. If anything, it only spurred them on. Bending the earth smothered the flames, the earthbenders that were close to the wall then bent a large column beneath them to push them to the top of the wall. Earthbenders, who were still at the bottom, strengthened the column and bent shorter ones out of the earth, creating something like a stepladder, allowing troops to breach the walls. Firebenders, keep the heat on them, Zuko ordered as he reached for his Dao swords, drawing them out of their sheath. Non-benders, keep them off the walls. As those words left his mouth, the enemy had reached the top of the wall. Look out! Shin cried out, pushing him out of the way of a sword. He plunged his pike into the offending enemy, killing him instantly. He yanked his pike out and pushed the body off the wall. You okay, sir? He asked as the body fell to the ground below. Zuko's answer was to move past him and decapitated an earthbender who was about to strike him. Does that answer your question? He asked Shin, who only grinned in response. They, along with the rest of the defenders, continued to fight the enemies on the wall, while the firebenders continued to bombard the enemies below. They took lives, but lives were also taken from them as well. The walls were continuously being bombarded by rock salvos. Earthbenders who had a greater accuracy would throw rocks at the troops on the top of the walls. Also, the gate was being hit constantly by a great stone ram. As they fought, the defenders saw the gate break open from the pressure of the ram. The earthbenders who were bending the ram stood aside so that the ostrich horse cavalry could charge through. Sir, how are we going to deal with the ostrich horses? A nearby soldier asked Zuko. The exiled prince's answer was to blow a sharp whistle, piercing the air. As the ostrich horse cavalry poured through the gate, they discovered that they were trapped by a half-ring of tundra tanks. As they reeled back, caught off guard by the tactic, they were slaughtered by a hail of incredibly accurate arrows. When Shing had gone to check on the trebuchets, Zuko had sent a message to his uncle and Captain G, telling them to position the Yen archers in the buildings surrounding the gate and to also move the tundra tanks into a half-ring formation around the gate. He knew that the enemy would send in the cavalry to quickly end the fight. As the last ostrich horse fell, Zuko quickly sheathed his weapons and bent 2 fireballs into the air. It was the signal for their cavalry to charge. "The enemy is out of the colony," Zuko yelled out to the wall, drawing his swords again. "Now let's send them packing." He leapt onto one of the rock stepladders and ran down it, killing the enemy soldiers along the way. Xing turned to the other soldiers on the wall as they all watched him run down. "You can take the stairs and go through the gate if you want. I'm following his example," he told them. He leapt onto another of the stepladders and ran down it as well. The 2 of them reached the ground at the same time and began to fight the enemy soldiers back to back. Some of the soldiers followed their example, but the rest of them poured out of the colony gates and smashed into the enemy forces, the Komodo rhinos that the catapult attachments hammered away at the stepladders until they fell. The tundra tanks were the ones who sent the enemy troops packing. Whether they ran over the troops or burned them, either one worked for the tundra tanks. As they watched the last enemy troops disappear, the soldiers let out a cheer. Zuko looked at Xing. "How many did we lose?" he asked over the cheering. He was panting a little bit, suddenly feeling like he had been drained of energy. "It's nothing we can't recover from, sir," the soldier assured him with a grin. His pike covered in blood and the light seemed to gleam wickedly off it. Then, suddenly, the crowd pressed in on Zuko, the cheering turned into chanting. "Zuko! Zuko! 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 Zuko!" They chanted before hoisting Zuko up onto someone's shoulders. They were chanting his name. It was something he had never heard before. "I think we've all earned ourselves a drink. How about it, boys?" called out Xing, getting a chorus of loud agreement. "Then let's show our new commander how the 41st celebrates." The only thought Zuko had when he was being carried back to the colony was, why does this remind of that one hide-and-go-seek game we played with Naruto? For some reason, with the way the Earth Kingdom army had attacked and retreated, it just did. Flashback: Zuko kept himself hidden in the bush. He didn't know how long it had been since the game had started, and he didn't know if the others had been found or not. He peered out into the forest, and saw Naruto was looking in his general direction. "I know you're there, Zuko. It's just a matter of time," he called out before moving away out of Zuko's sight. "He knows where I am," Zuko thought, panicking. "I have to move." He broke out of the bush and ran in the opposite direction of the blonde. He wasn't exactly sure of what to do next. His brain was on autopilot. "I see you, Zuko. Here I come," Naruto's voice called to his right. He immediately banked left and kept running. Every time he heard Naruto's voice, he went in the opposite direction of where the voice was coming from. Sometimes he would go a different direction, but basically kept to the same idea of moving away from the voice. Before he knew it, he was back at the house's backyard. He saw the girls before being tackled by Naruto. "Gotcha!" he crowed. "That's the last one." "You mean no one got back safely?" Zuko asked. He would have thought at least one of them would have succeeded. "Are you kidding?" Naruto asked back, getting off him. "It took me the longest to find you." "Really, how long was it?" "About an hour and a half." "He's not kidding," Ty Lee said, cheerful despite the fact she had been caught. "He found me in 20 minutes. "Found me in 25, Mai said. "What about you, Azula?" Zuko asked his sister. "It's none of your business," she told him harshly. She stepped on a trip wire and found herself tied up by the foot and hanging upside down from tree branch, Naruto told him. "I found her in 5 minutes." Zuko just stared at her and began laughing. "It's not funny," she told him. "Yes, it is," he howled. His sister, the so-called prodigy, had been foiled by a trip wire. Oh, he was going to use this for as long as he could. After finally managing to calm down, he looked back at Naruto. "Wait, a trip wire?" The blonde smirked. "I booby-trapped the forest. I knew that you would all run into there, so I took precautionary measures. I also manipulated you into coming here, Zuko." "What?" "I knew that you would try to run away from my voice, so I used it to make you go in the direction I wanted you to go. Granted, there were a few times you didn't do what I wanted. But you still came here." The 4 of them, Ty Lee, Mai, Azula, and Zuko, just looked at him. He had planned that far ahead? Was the shared thought between them? "Wait a minute," Zuko said. I heard your voice every few minutes. There is no possible way you could have stayed close to me the entire time. His smirk grew wider. You underestimate me, Zuko, he said in reply, neglecting to mention the fact he had used clones. He turned to everyone else. So, have we figured out the lesson for today? There was a lesson? Ty Lee asked with surprise evident in her voice. How could there be a lesson from all that? Azula demanded. If anything, that was an embarrassment. One she hoped to never relive again. It's a simple one really, he told them. You simply have to look underneath the underneath. End flashback. He explained the concept to us after that, Zuko thought. Why does it keep coming back to me? His silent question was stopped when he was handed a drink. Come on, sir, Xing told him. Loosen up a little and drink up, you've earned it. He raised his drink. Men, raise what you have for a toast to our new commander, Prince Zuko, he yelled out. Zuko, chorused the soldiers, raising their own drinks and drinking heartily from them. Zuko smiled and drank what was in front of him. Xing was right, he did to loosen up. He spent half the night celebrating with the troops. Ji joined in at one point, but Iroh was content to drink his tea and beat the pants off any soldier who dared to play pie show against him. All in all, it was a good night. You've been fighting well, a voice he recognized now spoke. But you have yet to figure out the lesson those two can teach you. I've been a little busy trying to defend this colony, Lord Bahamut, he replied as he looked around Ember Island again. While he was in these dreams, he found that he could not move, only look. I don't have a lot of time to figure what my younger self and the Blue Spirit are supposed to show me. It's not what they are supposed to show you, it's more what they don't want you to do. Zuko looked out to the setting sun that shined down on Ember Island. What don't they want me to do? That was a little cryptic and confusing. They'd been trying to make you choose, correct? The voice of the Dragon King asked him, despite sounding like he already knew the answer. Yes, I assume they want me to choose between one of them, Zuko replied. You assumed correctly. However, there are more than just two choices. He was again awoken by the morning bells. He got out of the bed and began to dress. It had been 4 days since he and his uncle had come to the colony, and for the past 4 days, he had fighting off the Earth Kingdom army led by General had spent many hours in the map room, trying to figure out how the General Fawn would attack them next and how the 41st Division should respond. He had spent quite some time on the ship reading, and now, he was glad his uncle had brought those books about tactics and strategy. When the Earth Kingdom army attacked, he was on the walls or the front lines fighting against them alongside the men. He had gotten along well with the troops as well. After the initial hostility disappeared during that second battle, the 41st was proud to be under Zuko's command. He didn't treat his troops like disposable tools. He ate with them, drank with them, and if two soldiers were fighting each other, he tried to break it up and find what the problem the two had. Ji said that he was acting more like his uncle than his father. He took it as a compliment. He walked out of the building and saw Xing walking past. Morning, sir, the soldier said, saluting him. Once he realized that his hatred for Zuko was misplaced, the two of them got on fine. He was an easy man to get along with, unless you did something earn his ire. In battle, he was deadly with a pike. He was one person Zuko trusted to cover his back while in a fight, which had been proven in the attacks by General Fawn's army. Morning, Shang, he replied, returning the salute. Walk with me, if you please. You okay, sir? Shang asked as they walked through the streets. As they did, people turned to look at the exiled prince and bowed their heads in respect. After holding the colony for this long, they knew who he was, and they were willing to overlook his status to see his deeds. Something's bothering me, he admitted. Something feels off about the last few attacks. They always seem to pull out just as we push them back. During the last attack, they practically ran once we forced them off the wall. It didn't seem like they retreated because they were forced to. More like because they wanted to. So they ran? The soldier shrugged. It just means they know they're outclassed. Zuko shook his head. I don't think so. But before he could continue with that line of though, they came across Iroh. Uncle! How was your night? Not bad. I played pie show against some of the crew again as well as some of the soldiers, he replied. I almost lost at one point. I'm sorry? Zuko stopped in the middle of the street. Did you just say that someone had beaten you at pie show? That was something he just couldn't believe. It was impossible. No, I said I almost lost, Iroh repeated, laughing at the shocked expression on his nephew's face. I managed to win in the end. Well, that's good. Truth to be told, Uncle, the day you say that you lost a pie show game is the same day I find out that I am somehow related to the Avatar, he stated. Meanwhile, in the spirit realm, a certain white-haired and bearded man sneezed. Be careful about you say, Zuko, Iroh warned. It may come back to haunt you. You jest, General Iroh, Shing said with a laugh. They continued to walk through Akawan, stopping by the walls to see how the defenses were doing, talking to the soldiers manning the walls, and to check the surrounding area, seeing if it had been changed by the battles. By the time they were done, lunchtime had come around and they found a nearby restaurant. They sat and ordered their meals, which were delivered. As they ate, a group of girls at a nearby table giggled and talked, casting glances over at them. When they were done, one of the girls got up from the table and came over. Is there something we can help you with? Iroh asked politely. She ignored him. Instead, she looked at the youngest of the three. Hey, you're Zuko, right? She asked. That's Commander Zuko to you, young lady, Shing told her. She was being quite rude, but he was willing to ignore it and write it off as her being young. She ignored him as well. So you are him. What do you want? Zuko asked her, already getting a bad feeling about this conversation. Well, me and my friends, she gestured back to the table with the group of girls, who started giggling again. We were wondering if you wanted to come over and eat with us instead of these old farts. She looked disdainfully at the other two men sitting at the table. Old? Demanded Shing. I'm 32, you little brat. He was not old by any means. So? She asked in a condescending voice. To her, he was old and thus boring. Young lady, you should always respect your elders, Iroh told her. He was not put off by her words, but even he admitted that she was being rude. Shut up, you old geezer, she told him with an irritated voice. She then turned to Zuko and asked in what she thought was a sexy voice. So, are you going to come and join us now? He didn't waste any time. Had you not insulted both Shing and my uncle, I might have considered it. But since you did, I won't. Please leave. Excuse me? The girl asked. Did you tell me that instead of eating at a table with hot girls that want to talk to you, you would rather eat with the way too beefed up soldier and the stupid old man? He was a guy. That was supposed to happen. A flash of light went across her eyes, causing her to step back in surprise. A fireball sailed right by her and hit the wall, dissipating harmlessly against the stone. Zuko had not even turned to look at her. He had just stuck out his arm and curled his hand into a fist. Next time you insult my uncle like that, I won't miss. Leave, he ordered. The girl huffed, walked back to her table, sat down and was immediately engulfed by her friends, who wanted to know what he said. That was nicely done, sir, Shing complimented. He was about to stand and smack that little twat himself. Perhaps a little more diplomacy could have been used? Iroh suggested. Throwing a fireball across her face wasn't really called for. The soldier shook his head. It wouldn't have helped, General. I know those kinds of girls. You have to be blunt with them if you want to get your point across. Even if she was being polite, I wouldn't have gone over there, Zuko stated. Why not? Asked Iroh. All of a sudden, one loud voice cried, Lord Zuko defended his uncle. He's so cool. Turning around to the direction of the voice, they saw it was a different girl at the table who spoke. What she said had the rest of the girls start squealing. And not just any kind of squealing. They were fangirls squealing. That's why. Ask Naruto how he dealt with them, Zuko said, suddenly fearful. Anybody else want to leave? They couldn't have left the restaurant faster. I take it that you've dealt with those kinds of girls before, sir? Shing asked as they walked down the street at a brisk pace. He smiled. Well, there was that one time on Ember Island. Flashback, Zuko stared at the wall, trying to get in all the details it had. Once he was certain, he turned around and was about to draw the wall when Naruto burst through the door. Zuko! Hide me! He said with desperation, clad only in his borrowed swim trunks. What's going on? Zuko asked. He had never seen the foreigner so scared before. Not important. Just hide me, he said again, his voice becoming more urgent. What did you do? I don't know. I just went down to the public beach. Next thing I know, I'm getting swarmed by girls. Isn't that a good thing? He didn't really know a lot about that. But he was fairly certain that it was supposed to be a good thing. Not when they start getting really touchy and screaming that they want my children. I mean, why me? I am not that good looking, he protested. As far as he knew, there wasn't a reason for them to come after him. He's still keeping up with that? Zuko thought. The prince thought that he would have finally stopped acting like that. Wait a minute, if you're here, where are they? His question was answered when they heard the faint but distinctive yelling of Find the blonde-haired one. We must have him. You led them here? Zuko asked. How could he do something like that? I panicked. Just hide me, please, Naruto begged. All right, follow me. I know a place where you can hide. Stay there while Uncle and I deal with this. And so, 5 minutes later, Naruto found himself in a closet. Why are you hiding? There are a lot of girls out there practically begging for what is dangling between your legs. The Kyuubi groused. It is how they want to use what's dangling between my legs that I don't agree with, Naruto silently replied. He had been horrified by some of the things they suggested to him. So? The fox asked him. I know I found some of those suggestions to be a little kinky. Now you're telling me that you didn't? Yes. Liar. However, whichever conversation was going to turn out next, they never knew. Azula, who was halfway in changing into her swimsuit, opened the closet door and looked at Naruto. It was then that he realized that Zuko had purposely hid him in her room. He is so going to be pranked, the blonde silently promised. Meanwhile, the two of them just stared at each other. Is it possible that you'll believe me when I say that your brother hid me here in order to avoid a mass horde of girls and that this is in no way, shape, or form me being a pervert? Naruto asked, sounding hopeful. No, she finally answered, clenching her hand into a fist. He sighed. One could always hope. After that, he tore out of the closet and ran out the door. Azula chased after him with fire in her hands, screaming about him being a pervert. Unfortunately, he chose to run out the front door, right past Zuko, Iroh, and the mass horde of girls who were looking for him. He spent the rest of the afternoon running. End flashback. I don't think Naruto has ever forgiven me for that, Zuko said as he finished up the story. He smiled a little at the memory. Shing nearly fell to the ground in laughter. I would have never thought that the paragon of the Fire Nation would have trouble with women, he said as he tried to make sure he stayed upright. All of a sudden, the earth started to shake and rumble. Parts of the street gave way, forming holes in the ground. Out of these holes came the non-benders of General Fang's army. How are they here? Shing demanded, holding his pike ready. Suddenly, as the Earth Kingdom soldiers attacked the colony, Zuko realized what Naruto meant by look underneath the underneath. I'm an idiot. Now I know why the last few attacks have been so weak. Fang was distracting us while Earthbenders were tunneling beneath us. He ducked to avoid a swing from an enemy with an axe and bent a fireball into the man's stomach. He looked around and saw that there were other Fire Nation soldiers fighting nearby. Soldiers, rally on me! He bellowed, hoping they would hear him over all the confusion. They did and fought their way to him. Uncle, find Captain G and the lieutenants. Find other soldiers fighting in the streets and take command. Have the firebenders throw fire down the holes and have the non-benders take care of the enemies up top. We'll try to push them back through the gate. See if you can get someone to coordinate the soldiers that are still in the barracks. He hurriedly ordered. Iroh nodded in acknowledgement and ran off to find G and the lieutenants. Shing, relay the same to nearby soldiers, he told the big soldier as he approached one of the holes. I'll take care of this. He took his stance, breath, bent a fireball into existence, and threw it down the hole. Once he saw just how far down the hole went, he bent the fire cradled in his hands into a continuous stream and directed it into the hole. He didn't stop when the screams started coming from the hole, he kept the stream of fire going. But once they stopped, he did too. To make sure the hole wouldn't be used again, he sealed the exit with a ring of fire that would make its way down and into the tunnel. Encouraged by what he just did, the soldiers of the 41st followed his example. It was slow work, mostly because they had to seal off the tunnels. But they pushed the enemy back to the colony gate. Because of the surprise created by the tunnels, many Fire Nation soldiers died. But Zuko wasn't going to let his men be demoralized by that. He kept them together and kept pushing them on. As they pushed the enemy back, they met up with other soldiers, being led by the lieutenants. By the time they reached the city gate, the 41st was out in full force. We got them on the run! One of the lieutenants cheered. It did seem like it. The non-benders were falling back through the open gate. Feeling that victory was all but secured, Zuko took the lead. Let's kick these rockheads out of Akawan, he roared, charging through the gate with the 41st hot on his heels. It was when they ran into the fields outside of the colony's walls that he realized that the non-benders weren't being pushed back. They were luring the 41st into a trap. Waiting for them were the earthbenders of General Fong's army, with rocks ready to be used. Fire! Commanded one of the earthbenders, and they released their barrage. Fall back! Zuko ordered before falling to the ground in order to avoid the barrage. The 41st tried to flee back into the colony, but there were those who were not fast enough, and were bludgeoned to death by the rock barrage. When the gate was almost closed, the only people who were left outside was Zuko, Xing, and a few other soldiers who didn't make it through the gate in time but managed to avoid the barrage. Zuko began to stand back up when he heard a voice yell, "Sir, look out!" He felt someone shove him out of the way and back to the ground. As he regained his balance, he looked up and saw something that he didn't really want to see. "Shun!" he cried in horror. The soldier was standing before him with a sharpened column of rock piercing his chest. His blood dripped off the column and fell through the air, finally splashing against his commander's face. "Damn, I missed the brat," the earthbender who bent the earth column said. "Well, I'll just have to." Whatever he was going to say, nobody knew. Because that was the exact moment Zuko decapitated him with one swing of his swords. He didn't stop there. He tore into them. He made full use of his swordsmanship, his fire-bending, and even his rage. They would pay for that. They would pay with their lives. They all tried to resist him, to fight him off. But his rage and anger were too great. He swatted all their attempts aside and kept on killing them. Later, he would remember seeing glimpses of the blue spirit beside him, somehow looking pleased. Eventually, they all ran away from him. He was about to go after them when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He spun around, ready to attack the person who would dare stop him, only for him to find it was Iroh. "Control yourself, Zuko," he commanded with the full authority that he had carried for a long time. "The enemy has retreated. We must tend to the wounded now." He snapped out of it at those words. He raced back through the gate and into the colony. But it was too late. Sheng was dead. His body lay amongst the others who had died in the ambush, for that was what it was. Not a battle, but an ambush. As he looked upon the bodies, he thought he saw his younger self staring at them as well. "Uncle, can you oversee this?" he asked Iroh, standing behind him. His uncle said nothing, he simply nodded. He quickly left, all but running to the command center. When he arrived, he looked for and found the nearest empty room, which luckily had not been taken yet. As he sat down on the bed, what had just happened kept going through his mind, every single detail. It reminded him of the night he and Azula saw what Naruto was like in a fight. Flashback: the night had taken over as Azula and Zuko made their way back to the beach house. "Why did we even go there?" Zuko asked as they walked through a forest, staying on the path. "Someone said that a dragon lived on the other side of the island. I wanted to go see if it was true," Azula reminded him. "What were you planning to do if we found the dragon? Fight it?" he asked with blatant sarcasm, rolling his eyes as well. "Well, of course. Why else would I bring you along?" she asked in return with equal sarcasm. "You actually wanted my company for once? It would be nice if it was true, but he knew it was just wishful thinking." She scoffed at that absurd notion. "I needed someone who would back me up if we actually found the dragon. Ty Lee would exaggerate, Mai would skip details, and I don't trust the foreigner." "Why do you dislike Naruto?" he asked, genuinely curious. The blonde had been nothing but friendly to them ever since he had been found. "He's insufferable, arrogant, smug, and he makes fun of me whenever he can." She listed off the reasons. "Sounds like a match made in the spirit world if you asked me," he muttered to himself. Unfortunately, she heard him. "What did you say, dum-dum?" she demanded, turning to face him. He knew the look on her face. But he was going to stand by what he said. "The way you just describe him, he sounds just like you. So it would be a perfect match." "Well, isn't this sweet?" a nasally voice said, coming from the forest. "The little girl has a crush. It does not change the fact that she and the boy must be killed," another voice, a deeper one, spoke. "Who's there?" demanded Azula as she looked around. But all she saw was the forest. "Oh, looks like they heard us. We might as well reveal ourselves," the first voice said. They heard bushes rustling and two men appeared in front of them. There was only one word that could describe each man. For the first one, it was Weasel. He was small, his eyes were shifty, and his face looked like a weasel. The second man was big, just big. His muscles looked like they had muscles. His nose looked like it had been broken and reset several times, and his face looked like it never had an emotion show since he was born. But despite the differences of the two men, they wore a kind of green cloth, instantly identifying them. "What are Earth Kingdom rabble doing on Ember Island?" Zuko asked aloud. While he spoke, he tried to discreetly pick up two rocks. "Isn't it obvious?" The weasel-looking one, who Azula had silently labeled as Weasel, asked back. "By the order of the Earth King, both the prince and the princess of the Fire Nation are to be taken out," the big one, who Zuko had silently labeled Big, stated in a monotone voice. Azula scoffed. "As if you could beat a fire-bending prodigy," she told them. Fire was the superior element, after all, and she knew how to wield it. "Oh, the little girl thinks she's ready to play with the big boys," Mr. Weasel said with a laugh. Quicker than they could see, he drew two knives and threw them at the tree Azula and Zuko were standing next to. "She fails to realize that she's still wet behind the ears," he said as the two knives seemed to thrum in the trunk of the tree. Zuko suddenly threw the rocks at the would-be assassins. While they were distracted, he pulled out the knives out of the tree. "Come on, Azula, we need to run." He grabbed her arm and ran down the forest path. They ran and ran, too afraid to see if the assassins were chasing them or not. Everything seemed to blur together, even when they came out of the forest. They made to the beach below the house when the assassins caught up. "Now that wasn't very nice, little kitties," Mr. Weasel told them as he and Mr. Big cut them off. "Azula," Zuko whispered, "when you get a chance, run up to the house and get Uncle. I think I can hold them off for that long." "With what?" she hissed. "You only have the two knives and your fire-bending is pathetic. Azula, for once in your life, trust me," he told her with a quiet snarl. She was his little sister and Agni take it, he was going to protect her. They heard rock breaking away from rock. They turned and saw a huge block of rock come out of the cliff side and coming straight at them. They quickly ducked and the thing flew over to where Mr. Big was. He caught it and simply held it with one hand. "Now, are the little kitties done whispering to each other?" Mr. Weasel asked, an evil grin slowly appearing on his face. He produced another knife and threw it at them. Zuko pushed Azula out of the way, allowing the knife to hit him in the shoulder. "Azula, go!" he yelled, pain covering his voice. She did as she was told, taking off at a dead sprint up to the house, shouting out "Uncle, help!" with all she could. As Mr. Big watched her go, he broke the chunk of rock into smaller pieces. He then bent a wall in front of her, making her stop and becoming an easy target. Having no other choice, and in a small state of panic, she ran in the opposite direction of the wall, going back to the beach. Zuko was trying to hold off Mr. Weasel when this happened. When he saw Azula come running back, Mr. Weasel took advantage of the distraction by knocking the knives out of his hands and knocking him down. Mr. Big began to throw the rocks at Azula. She dodged most of them and was about to bend a fireball at him when she got a rock in the stomach. It knocked the wind out of her, thus making her lose the fireball. She fell to the ground, clutching her stomach in pain. "This has taken too long," Mr. Big said, standing over her with the remaining rocks. "We should kill them now." When they heard that, both Zuko and Azula tried to get away by crawling. As they did, they suddenly felt a sharp pain in the leg. Looking down, they saw a knife sticking out of their legs. "TSK, TSK, TSK," Mr. Weasel said, waving his finger at them. "Didn't you know it's rude for you to try and leave when you're the guests of honor?" He reached for more knives. "Now, let's get to the killing. If one more knife goes anywhere them, you will lose the ability to throw them," a voice told him, making both him and Mr. Big stop. Azula and Zuko turned to see who had come to help them. "Naruto?" both said in surprise. They had been hoping for their uncle, not him. Well, Mr. Weasel said. "Another little kitty who went and stuck his nose in the wrong place. Are you going to try and help them?" "Not try. I am going to help them." The blonde heard a foot move in the sand and turned to Mr. Big, the one who moved the foot. "You take another step, pal, and you're dead," he threatened the earthbender. Mr. Big ignored him and took another step. It earned him having his throat cut from ear to ear. He dropped the rocks he was bending and began choking on his own blood. Stepping out from behind the dying assassin was another Naruto. "I did warn you. You didn't listen," the second Naruto said. He walked back over to the first Naruto as Mr. Big died before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. How is that possible? Zuko asked in stunned wonder. He had never seen anything like that before in his life. Wait, I know about your kind, Mr. Weasel said. His eyes seemed to gleam in the moonlight. My kind? Asked Naruto, raising a questioning eyebrow. Yeah, you're from across the sea, aren't you? I heard that there are people over the sea that are master of stealth, assassination, and weaponry. I even heard that some of those people are masters of the knife. He gave a psychotic grin as he began flipping a knife. I've always wanted to fight one of you guys. I want to see which one of us is the better knife hand. We'll start on 3, okay? 1. He was cut off when Naruto appeared in front of him and shoved a knife into his throat. 3. The blonde whispered in the dying man's ear. He pulled the knife out and Mr. Weasel fell to the ground dead. He walked over to Zuko and Azula and pulled the knives out of their legs, trying to be careful. Can you guys walk? He asked as he pulled the knife out of Zuko's shoulder. They stood up and tried to walk. They could do so, but they needed help. All right, that answers the question. He quickly made 2 clones. He had one clone help Zuko while the other helped Azula. As they made their way up the hill, he walked out into the ocean until his feet were submerged. He looked at his blood-splattered hands and then saw his reflection in the water. It was also covered in blood. It was then Naruto realized that even though he was a shinobi, that was the first time he had killed someone. He fell to his knees and began to wash his hands and face vigorously. Even when they were clean, he continued to wash them. It was like the blood wasn't coming off. End flashback. The door to the room opened and Iroh stepped in. Are you feeling better, nephew? He asked, sounding and looking concerned. I don't know, uncle, Zuko answered honestly. He had known that he was losing soldiers and defending the colony. But it never hit home until he saw Shing lying there, among the dead. It's all right. I have been where you are now many times, his uncle assured him. I have lost friends on the battlefield, some even in front of my eyes. You will never forget them, but you learn how to deal with the pain. Like you did with Lu Ten's death? Iroh fell silent, and that silence seemed to engulf the room. Yes, he finally said. It hurt to say it, but it was an old hurt, one that he was familiar with. His nephew rose from the bed and went over to the nearby window, which had been left open by someone. When he saw the small, but noticeable black clouds on the horizons, an idea began to form in his head. Uncle, are those storm clouds? He asked, wanting to be sure. His uncle joined him at the window. Yes, they are, he answered after looking at the clouds. When he heard those words, a grin appeared on his face. I've got an idea to keep Fang and his men away from Akawan. The storm had arrived just as night had fallen, covering the land in a shower of rain. The rain was able to allow a single boat to cross a river that was near Fang's fortress without anyone seeing them. Once they were across, the Yuan archers climbed out of the boat and quickly made their way to the fortress's walls. To ensure that no one would see them, they wore black clothing, changed the color of their face paint, and had removed their headbands. Are we all ready? Bao Yu asked both his archers as they stood in the rain. They nodded their answer. Remember, we are to only kill the sentries. Once that is done, we wait until Commander Zuko arrives. Understood? He got nods again. All right, archers, use grapple arrows, he ordered, readying his own bow. The archers selected the required arrow, nocked, and fired it up to the top of one of the side walls that led into the fortress. When the ropes went taut, they all hooked up and began to climb. Once they reached the top of the wall, they ran silently towards the fortress. Once inside, they split up and followed the orders they were given. Zuko stood in front of the gate that led into the fortress. All around, the darkness of the night was being gently overridden by the light of the dawn. He knew that the archers were successful. Had they failed, the fortress would have been on alert. Instead, the fortress was completely silent. Still, it was better to be safe than sorry. Are we all set? He asked Ji, who stood at his side. On his other side was his uncle. Behind him was the entire 41st. Yes, sir, the captain answered promptly. All right then, send the question, he ordered. Ji took a couple of steps back and bent a small, weak fireball up into the air. Once it got past the gate, it faded away. They waited a few minutes before they received their answer. A single arrow was fired from within the fortress, and it landed right in front of Zuko's feet. Tied around the arrow was a single strip of green cloth. We're good to go, he declared, taking a few steps forward and settling into a stance. Silence reigned as they waited. When the light of the dawn was quietly overtaken by the light of the rising sun to rise, and when it did, he closed his eyes and began to breathe in and out, calling to the fire within. When he was sure of himself, he took a step forward and with a cry people would later claim to cause the sun to fully appear over the horizon, bent a big fireball at the gate. It sailed through the air and hit the gate with tremendous force, tearing them from their hinges and sent them crashing down to the ground. The 41st rushed past him and into the fortress. By the time any of the enemy soldiers could even try to mount a resistance, it was too late. They had been caught sleeping, for the men on sentry duty had been killed by the Yen archers and could not warn them. Zuko walked almost quietly into the fortress, his uncle and Captain G following behind him. Inside, the 41st stood along the walls, prisoners sitting on the ground behind them. When he looked around and saw the Earth Kingdom general wasn't in sight, he looked up at the tower. "General Fong!" he suddenly roared, his voice filling the air. "I am Zuko, Prince of the Fire Nation and heir to the throne of Agni. I am the commander of the 41st Division of the Fire Nation Army, and I challenge you to single combat, here and now." The entire fortress went silent as everyone waited in silence to hear the general's reply. After a minute of that silence, the general appeared, coming out of the tower. "You are bold boy to challenge me," he said as he stood before Zuko, looking down at him. "I will protect Akawan. It is a colony of the Fire Nation and it is my duty as a prince to defend it against any enemy," Zuko replied, looking him straight in the eye. "You are an exiled prince," Fong reminded him, trying to see if he could get him angry. "You have guts to back up your people, even if it results in your punishment. I like that in a man, but I am afraid that this is the end of the line for you. It didn't work. I'm still a prince, and it's still my duty. And if I kill you, Akawan will be safe from harm." All of the soldiers, even those on opposing sides, were surprised by those words. The prince intended to have the Singe combat be to the death. It was rare when someone fought to the death in single combat. They usually just went until one of the combatants was knocked unconscious. To say that single combat went to the death meant the person was, pardon the pun, dead serious. The general laughed. "So be it," he declared. The two combatants stepped back to a more respectable distance. They didn't bow to one another. They just circled each other slowly instead, moving in their respective stances. After a minute circling, Fong made the first move. He bent a chunk of stone out of the ground and hurled it at Zuko. He rolled forward to avoid the rock and went in low on Fong, drawing his Dao swords as he moved. Each swung his swords, but Fong kept dodging. Despite his size, he was agile. It didn't last long as he managed to nick the general on his shoulder and side. Fong responded by bending the earth beneath his feet to throw him off balance. He reacted quickly by backing off and putting some distance between the two of them. "It's been a while since someone has managed to nick me," Fong stated as the two faced each other again. "Expect a lot more. We are fighting to the death," Zuko reminded him. Indeed. He looked over to a large stack of giant stone rings. Using his earth bending, he lifted ring after ring, up into the air and threw them at his. Zuko responded by bending his fire onto the edges of his swords. He hacked his way through the barrage of rings, steadily moving towards the general. Once he was through, he leapt at Fong, going for an airborne strike. But the general jumped away and bent a decent-sized rock at him. He tried to block it with his swords. But the impact jarred his hands, forcing him to release his grip on his swords. Because he had released them, they fell to the ground, skidding away from him. "Now why don't you try fighting me like an actual bender?" Fong taunted him. "Or are you worthless without your swords?" He gritted his teeth but said nothing. He went into a fire-bending stance and bent a fireball at Fong. The general dodged it and bent a hail of small rocks at him. He rolled to the side and saw that two rock walls were about to smash him together. It would have worked, had he not rolled forward, getting out from between the walls, and bent a low stream of fire at Fong. "Break his roots, Uncle used to tell me," he thought. "I wonder if it's the same for an earthbender." He was willing to find out. Fong saw the fire stream and quickly moved back to avoid it, coming out of the solid stance he was in. Zuko bent another and another at the general, making him continually move backwards. He pressed the advantage that he had. He dimly heard the cheering from the 41st in the background but didn't pay attention to it. He kept pushing Fong back and back until finally, the general seemed to trip. He moved in with an overhead kick with fire attached to finish it off. But it did not end the way he thought it would. As soon as Fang hit the ground, he rolled backwards and bent the earth to jet out a column. The column hit Zuko hard in the stomach, which sent him rolling away on the ground. He tried to stand up, but when he did, Fang appeared and slugged him across the face. It sent him back to the ground. As he tried to stand up again, he heard Fang say something. "Is that all, sniveling little brat?" he asked before punching him in the stomach, making him fall to the ground. "Is that all, pathetic little charcoal sucker?" Fang asked him before kicking him in the stomach. He grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him so that they were face to face. "Is that all the Prince of the Fire Nation has to offer me, huh?" he asked a third time before throwing him to the ground again. Zuko could hear the soldiers calling for him, telling to get up, not to give in or to fight back. He tried to stand up but was kicked by Fang again. The general wasn't even bothering to use earthbending now. He was just kicking him over and over. He could feel the pain blossom in his chest, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't move his body. He lifted his head and saw that time seemed to have stopped, soldiers frozen in motion. Once again, he saw his younger self and he saw the blue spirit standing over him. "The time has come," the blue spirit hissed. "Use your anger and hatred and destroy this man." "No!" young Zuko shouted, trying to get his attention. "Bring forth your hope and your determination to stand up again. You must choose. If you do not, you will die. Choose. 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 Choose." He didn't know what to do. He couldn't choose one over the other, it felt wrong to him. But if he didn't choose, he would die. It was just so confusing. And the pain in his chest seemed to hamper whatever thoughts he tried to think. Choose. The vision of his younger self told him, his voice becoming more urgent. Choose. The vision of the blue spirit ordered him, his voice becoming more demanding. Choose. Choose. Suddenly, with a clarity that seemed to have come out of nowhere, he remembered everything that Iroh, Naruto, and even Bahamut tried to teach him. There is energy all around us. The energy is both yin and yang, positive energy and negative energy. There are other ways to generate lightning. I am the one who stands in the light with hope and determination. And I am the one who stands in the darkness with rage and hatred. You simply have to look underneath the underneath. It's not what they are supposed to show you, it's more what they don't want you to do. There are more than just two choices. All that information went coursing through his head, and when he connected the dots, he understood. Finding the ability to move his arms, he reached out and grabbed both in an iron-like grasp. Neither of you can tell me what to do, he told them, his voice sounding harsh from the pain coming from his chest. I am not you. You are me. And I say that this is enough. He pulled them down towards him. As they drew closer, they disappeared. But he knew where they went. All of a sudden, the pain was gone, and he could think clearly once more. Then time resumed at pace. Fang stood above his body with a fist ready. Is that all? He roared, swinging his fist down at him. But this time, Zuko was ready. Swinging his legs upwards, he knocked the punch away. Flipping himself onto his feet, he now stood across from the earth-bending general. Then he did one simple thing, he roared. But it was more than just a roar. It was something that no one had ever seen in the history of bending, something so incredible. When Zuko roared, he didn't just roar. He also breathed lightning. Fang was lifted into the air by the lightning and was flung into a nearby wall, crashing into it hard. When the lightning finally stopped, the general had a fist-sized hole where his heart should have been, and he didn't move. He was dead. Zuko stood there, panting for breath. It was the only sound in the entire fortress. The technique he had just created had drained him quite a bit. It was all he could do to remain standing. The silence lasted for an entire minute before the 41st Division just lost it. They started screaming and cheering in a volume so loud, it scared off the nearby birds. The Earth Kingdom soldiers, disheartened at the sight of their general, cut and ran, fleeing the fortress. As his soldiers celebrated, he felt himself about to fall. Zuko! Cried Iroh as he stopped his nephew from falling. Are you all right? I'm fine, uncle, he tried to assure his uncle. I'm just a little winded. He tried to walk on his own, but it felt like the strength had left his legs. Can you help? I want to go see the general's body. He couldn't believe he had done something like that. He wanted to see it with his own eyes. Iroh nodded in agreement as he helped Zuko stand and walk. The 41st were already going into the tower, to see if there was any useful information or just plain old treasure. As Zuko walked over to the body with his uncle's help, he felt the strength in his legs return. By the time he reached the body, he felt like he could walk on his own again. The general's body was now slumped against the wall, his head lowered against the body. A single Earth Kingdom soldier, who had run away like the others, guarded it. "Stay back. I will not let you discreet General Fang's body," he told them, holding his spear at the ready. "Relax. I'm not going to do anything to him," Zuko told him. "But why haven't you run like the others?" If his face was anything to go by, he was offended. "He saved my battalion from being used by the Fire Nation as bait. We were all grateful for him to have rescued us. If I ran, I would be disgracing what he did for us." He looked at the soldier, studying his face. "Is there anyone in your battalion named Sensu?" he finally asked. There was something familiar about his face. The soldier stiffened. "That's my name." "How do you know my name?" Zuko laughed. He couldn't believe it. That was why he looked so familiar. "I met your family. They're worried sick about you. Your father was planning on going to the front lines to search for you." "Ah, really?" asked the soldier. "If you want my advice, then go home after this. They deserve to know you're still alive." He and Iroh walked away after giving him that piece of advice. They sat down on a nearby staircase. They were soon joined by Ji and Baoyu. The four of them just watched the soldiers of the 41st race around the fortress, trying to find something worth taking. "By Agni's flaming balls!" shouted someone, like they had seen something they couldn't believe. One of the soldiers came running out of the tower. He looked frantically around and saw Zuko sitting nearby. "Sir, you have to come with me," he said as he gave a hasty salute. "What's the matter, soldier?" Ji asked, rising from where he sat. While he might have not been in Akawan long enough, he knew that the soldiers of the 41st usually didn't get this excited over anything. "We just found something incredible. They're bringing it up out of the tower basement now." He ran back and they had no choice but to follow. They hurried over to the tower. A hole in the tower that was the size of a sky bison had been rapidly created to bring whatever it was they found out. There was now a crowd encircling the hole. Zuko and Iroh made their way to the front of the crowd. "Everyone, back up. We're coming out, and we're going to need a lot of room," a voice from inside the hole called out. The crowd backed up considerably. 4 soldiers came out of the hole. It looked like they were pulling something. What they were pulling became obvious in a moment. It was a long platform on wheels, but it was what was on the platform that had everyone's attention. "That should be impossible," one soldier cried out. "It can't be real," another shouted. Zuko just stared in wonder. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked in a shocked whisper. Iroh simply nodded his head. "Yes, it is." He looked at his uncle. "But I thought you conquered the last living dragon. That story was near legendary in the Fire Nation. It was how Iroh got his title of Dragon of the West." "Apparently, I was mistaken," he said as he looked at what was before him. Sitting on the platform, covered in chains to hold it down, was a dragon. It stared at them all with hostile eyes. "What is a dragon doing underneath an Earth Kingdom fortress?" Ji asked as he joined Zuko and Iroh. As he saw the dragon, he could only stare in wonder. "I'd say that General Fang was trying to tame it so he could use it against the Fire Nation," Baoyu said as he joined the group. Even though he was surprised by what he saw, he didn't let it show on his face. "Then it's a good thing that dragons are stubborn creatures, especially the young ones," Iroh said as he got a little closer to the dragon, who tried to bite when he got too close. "Well, he's a feisty one," he commented with a dry chuckle. "What should we do, Uncle?" Zuko asked. He was a bit lost on what to do. "That is your decision, nephew," Iroh told him. "You are the one who brought us this victory. He is your spoils of war." Everyone stared at him, and then at Zuko. He just stared at the dragon, looking at everything. Its coat was a deep, deep red, almost crimson. Its whiskers and horns, as well as itself, looked like it was still growing. But there was one thing that caught his attention. Around its right eye, the scale color was black, not red. It almost looked like that its eye was burned, like his. He knew what he had to do when he saw that. He walked around the platform, cutting every chain that was attached to the platform with his fire bending. Finally, he had only one chain left. Looking the dragon directly in the eye, he melted the chain, cutting it loose. All the chains fell off the dragon. It was finally free. It gave a roar of excitement, but the roar turned to growling as he faced Zuko. Iroh, with the help of Ji and Baoyu, managed to push the crowd back further, giving Zuko and the dragon more room. The two of them faced each other without moving. You probably don't understand me, Zuko told the dragon. But we are both young creatures, we have yet to attain our true level of power. If you wish to fight me, then I will gladly provide. But let that day be when we are older, wiser, and more powerful. Until then. He gestured to the open sky. Be free. The dragon seemed to get the point. It opened its wings and flew off into the sky. After watching it disappear, Zuko looked back to what was left of the 41st Division. All right, break's over, he called out. It's time we went back to Akawan. When the reinforcements get here, we'll let them know about the fortress. The journey back to Akawan was normal as there was a sense of relaxation that had settled into both the soldiers and officer. But somehow, Zuko knew that it wasn't going to be that easy. His suspicions were confirmed when they reached Akawan and saw fresh soldiers manning the walls. They were told to report immediately to the barracks. When they arrived, they saw that there was a new division in the barracks. They were brought to the new commander of the Akawan military force, a colonel. Ah, so these are the traitors to the Fire Nation, he began. Captain G. Why were these men not thrown into jail when their identities were discovered? General Iroh and Prince Zuko revealed themselves during an attack by an Earth Kingdom army, sir, G explained. They offered their services in the fight. We needed every man we could take. I see. He sniffed condescendingly. And who was it that led your forces for the past 6 days? Was it you or General Iroh? No, sir, the captain answered honestly. It was Prince Zuko who led the men. So, you willingly let a traitor lead the men? Why? This time, Zuko spoke. Because my actions are why they were kept here, guarding the colonies, he answered. Oh, so you felt like you had a responsibility to them. Is that it? Aang asked. It doesn't matter now. You'll be thrown into prison and there, you'll await your execution. Sir, protested Ji as nearby soldiers of the 41st took a step to their commander, ready to protect him at a moment's notice. Prince Zuko and General Iroh have been protecting this colony for the past 6 days. Had it not been for them, the colony would have surely fallen. But the colony hasn't fallen, has it? These traitors will face execution for their crimes, and we will finish off those rabble you seem to have a hard time getting rid of. He never finished that sentence, mostly because of the arrow that pierced through his top knot. Everyone looked at where that arrow had come from and saw that the Yen archers had their bows out and ready to use. If you finish that sentence, the next one will go through your brain. Baoyu threatened him. Another arrow knocked. How dare you? He spluttered, outraged by the action. The rabble of which you speak of was led by one of the top Earth Kingdom generals, the archer told him, his voice never changing. Furthermore, the rabble fled this morning when Prince Zuko fought the enemy general in single combat to the death. Prince Zuko killed him when he used the breath of lightning on the enemy general. Breath of lightning? Repeated Aang. That is ridiculous. Such a technique does not exist. And he would have heard of it if it did exist. It was created today by Prince Zuko. When we searched the fortress for valuable information, we had found a living dragon. Where is it? The colonel demanded. It should be brought to the Fire Lord. If he delivered a dragon to the Fire Lord, he would be well rewarded. He could even see a promotion for him. The dragon belongs to Prince Zuko by right of spoils of war, Baoyu told him. Prince Zuko freed the creature from its chains. When it wanted to fight, Zuko told it to come back when they were older and in their prime. After that, he let it go free. You fool! Do you realize what you just did? Aang yelled at Zuko, angry at the lost chance of a promotion. It earned him the sound of every bow held by a Yen archer being ready to use and pointing at him. Prince Zuko has spent the last 6 days fighting for the people in this colony, never for his own glory. The lieutenant continued. Combined with the actions of today, I believe Prince Zuko is to be granted a great reward. As head of the Yen archers and as such, second to Lord Naruto, paragon of the Fire Nation, I give Prince Zuko the title of dragon. You don't have that right, he shouted. Actually, he does, Iroh stated, earning the colonel's attention. Only the Fire Nation paragon can revoke a decision made by the head of the Yen archers. I have the 41st Division as witnesses to what Prince Zuko had done, Bao Yu declared. From today on, Prince Zuko will be known as the Scarred Dragon. Ing just stared hopelessly at Bao Yu. He couldn't see a way to refuse the head of the Yen archers. Everything he said was well within his power. He turned to the soldiers of the 41st. Is what he says true? He asked them. Sir. Yes, sir. They replied as one, willing to stand behind the exiled prince. In regard to the 41st Division, continued Bao Yu, they fought bravely and with honor for the past 6 days. As such, I believe it is their right to earn an emblem and a nickname. He gave Ing a pointed look. Why yes, they do, he gave in. If he refused, he could very well have a riot on his hands. And he wasn't sure if he and his soldiers would win. Bao Yu turned to Zuko. My lord, would you give them the honor of an emblem and a nickname? He asked. He nodded and faced the soldiers he had fought alongside with and admitted a little sheepishly. I can honestly say that I had never given the nickname much thought. I was too busy fighting to protect this colony. However, if you all agreed for me to be a dragon, I think it's only fitting I give you a nickname that makes you dragons as well. He took a deep breath. 41st Division of the Fire Nation Army, from this day on, you will be known as the Dragon's Fangs. His voice grew and swelled with authority. Let your emblem be that of a roaring dragon, proudly showing its fangs. The 41st busted out into cheering and celebrating at his words. Ing had just stood still in the middle of the parade ground. He had come with a new division to claim honor and glory for him and the new division, while also throwing the traitors into jail. But all of that was gone now. The celebrating had turned into a full-blown party that had the entire colony going. Everyone everywhere in the colony was celebrating. Food and drink were plenty and there was laughter all around. As night fell and the party continued, Zuko turned to look at Iroh. Maybe now would be the best time to leave, he suggested. He almost didn't want to leave, but they had to. Otherwise, Azula would come for them when she had been told. His uncle looked at all the celebration going on. Yes, we should leave. They grabbed their supplies from the command center and went to get their ostrich horse. When they found the ostrich horse, there was a note on the saddle. We knew that you would try to leave the festivities. Don't worry, we'll tell the 41st why you two disappeared. G and Bao Yu. P.S. Bao Yu sent the fastest massager hawk we have to Lord Naruto, explaining what happened. With any luck, he'll give his response to Fire Lord Ozai the same time he gets the official report. Although hopefully if Lord Naruto does get involved in another battle soon, he should demonstrate to the Fire Nation why he deserves to be legitimately promoted to an officer. They read the note once more and then burned it. They got on the ostrich horse and left the colony of Akawan through the gate. As everyone was partying, no one really paid attention to them. After an hour of riding, with the colony completely out of sight, Zuko spoke. Uncle? Yes, nephew? Replied Iroh. I'm ready to tell you about what happened in the storm. Now, he could find the words that had eluded him. And so 2 dragons, one who came from the west and one who was scarred, continued their journey. It was early evening when Sansa finally got to the house. He had spent the afternoon trying to find out about what happened to his father. It turned that he came back 2 weeks later, having found out that Sansa was rescued by General Fawn. Now, he was walked up to the door and knocked on it. It opened up to reveal a woman's face. When she saw who it was, she was shocked to see who stood at her door. He could only think of one thing to say. Hi, Mom, I'm home. Location, Fire Nation. Fire Lord Ozai read the report that came from Akawan. Initially, he was furious that his traitor of a brother and his disgraced son just decided to waltz into one of the colonies. Then he was surprised and pleased at how Zuko acted like a leader during the attacks. Perhaps he had some useful qualities after all. His mood turned sour when he read about how Zuko breathed lightning, freed a young captive dragon and was in turn given the title of dragon by the head of the Yen archers. He had just finished reading about how the 41st Division was nicknamed the Dragon's Fangs, when a servant came into the throne and bowed low. What is it? He asked. My lord, this message just came in from Lord Naruto. The instructions say that you should read this after you have the report from Akawan, the servant told him, keeping his head bowed. Give me the message and leave me. The servant did as he was commanded, handing the scroll he carried into the Fire Lord's hands and quickly left. Ozai paid him no attention to the servant. Instead, he opened the scroll. To the royal flaming asshole. To start off, yes, your daughter is safe. Do you think I let her be anything else? Now I know you've probably already read the report from Akawan. Bao Yu sent a hawk to me with a copy of the report. And just so you know, I find the reasons justifiable. He has my backing. Now about Zuko, can't you be proud of him? He was to generate lightning inside of himself, and was able to breathe it. I know for a fact that had Azula come with the idea and was able to successfully do it, you would have thrown a party. And he let the dragon go so that he could fight it when he was more powerful. What does that tell you? Because it tells me that he is going to try his hardest to improve his firebending, just so he could fight a dragon in its prime. For Agni's sake, Ozai, you should try at least to be proud of both of your children. So your son was a late bloomer. It doesn't mean you should automatically think him a failure. Give him some time to improve himself, and he just might actually surprise you. And, in case you didn't notice, he already did. 3 times. Paragon of the Fire Nation, Naruto Uzumaki. P.S. I've already sent my reply about the report back to Bao Yu. He knows that I stand by his decisions. So don't try to do anything funny with Bao Yu or the Yen archers, Ozai. Remember, they're loyal to me first and to you second. He stared at the scroll, reading it again. Once he was done, he threw it into the nearby fire and watched in satisfaction as it burned. The encampment used by the famous elite unit of the Fire Nation, the Rough Rhinos, was as small as it can get, perhaps because there were only 5 members who comprised of the unit. Since its formation, the Rough Rhinos had emerged to become one of the Fire Nation's mobile cavalry formation, before the Tundra tank was invented. As the Fire Nation relied more on its infantry, both firebender and non-benders alike, the role of the cavalry had been reduced. Yet, for Colonel Monk and his group, they were determined to prove to the Fire Lord that mobile cavalry still has its uses. Speaking of Colonel Monk, the leader of the group had a charisma that could not be rivaled by any other Fire Nation nobleman or military officer. Yet, for the leader of the Rough Rhinos, their opportunity would arrive when a falcon arrived at their camp. One of the other group members, a former Yuyan archer named Vatcher, had grabbed the parchment that was attached to a falcon's leg and delivered it to Monk. Meanwhile, a heavily bearded man sat in front of his tent, sharpening his own Guan Dao as his comrade. A bare-chested man carrying a BOLO sat beside him. "Did you hear?" the bare-chested man whispered. Akawan was under attack by the Earth Kingdom. Surprisingly, they managed to repel the attack. Kachi turned to his comrade with an amused look. "I wonder who was responsible for the miraculous victory in that colony?" Colonel Monk laughed as he gathered his men around the campfire. He still carried the letter that Vatcher handed to him, as a masked man named Yelu carried what appeared to be components for a new kind of explosive. "The rumors around the mill are true, boys," Monk said as he grinned.